Chapter 2356. 30 people, those of the Origin Emperor realm, attack. The more he fought, the more excited he became. Situ Muyang opened his starry eyes wide and said angrily. As the fight got more and more intense, Situ Muyang had completely forgotten his purpose for coming here. The mighty pressure of the Origin Emperor realm poured out as if it was overlooking the heavens and earth, surging and surging endlessly. This guy is just like Sui. He doesn't care about anything when he fights. I'm afraid that Sui won't come out, but he's already at odds with the Yutian Palace. Duguyuma shook his head. At the same time, all the elders in the pavilion were nervously watching the myriad sword alliances challenge. The Yutian Palace had always been aloof and indifferent. It was the first time they were challenged to such a state by a little guy. Damn it, brat, do you really think there's no one in the Yutian Palace? Is there no one in the Yutian Palace? Long Pashan cursed loudly. Haotian, have you seen this little guy around Sui before? Guyue smiled as his expression became more and more complicated as he turned to look at Jun Haotian. Jun Haotian quickly went closer to observe and shook his head after a while, indicating that he didn't know him. Judging from the performance just now, Situ Muyang's cultivation was enough to amaze Jun Haotian, who was known as a genius. However, he had never seen this little guy before. As for why he called Sui Junior Martial Uncle, he was even more confused. I've never seen him before. I don't know why he keeps calling Sui Junior Martial Uncle. Jun Haotian smiled bitterly. This brat is too much. Even if he's Suyi's brother, isn't he slapping Suyi's face by bullying the Yutian Palace like this? Suyi's first wife is Palace Master Xiaoman. Long Pashan's face turned red. How could someone with a fiery temper like him endure such humiliation? He knew that he had misspoken and immediately became listless. In front of the window, Guyue narrowed his eyes as a cold light surged from his kind eyes. He said softly, "Let them do what they want. Don't worry, old friends, is there really no one else in Yutian Palace?" Jun Haotian smiled as well. He looked at Long Pashan, Luowuya, and the others behind him and said respectfully, "Elders, please be patient. If it is really not enough, Haotian will go and fight again." Hearing this, Long Pashan, Nye Shuangjue, and the others shrugged and continued to watch helplessly. Since he was stalling, he had to act like he was stalling. It was unknown if the disciple who had informed them had given instructions, but one batch of disciples after another rushed into the void. Above the void, Situ Muyang, who was fighting like the wind, saw more and more disciples coming at him. His fighting spirit also reached its peak. Pushing his hands forward, a vast and mighty wind attribute energy pressure surged out from his body. A violent wind blew and the void trembled. Bang, bang, bang! As the number of people increased, the fighting spirit of the 30 disciples was instantly ignited, surrounding Situ Muyang in the center. Everyone's terrifying soul energy rushed to the heavens and earth. Visible energy light pillars swept across the heavens and earth. Brat, let's see how arrogant you can be. Even if you are Sect Master Su's friend, it is not your turn to behave atrociously here. You want to enter the secret realm and snatch the opportunity from us? You are still too inexperienced. Brat, we will let you suffer a little today. Don't say that we are bullying you with numbers. Everyone, let's attack together and end this brat. Don't embarrass the Imperial Palace. As the voice faded, the 30 experts shouted in unison. Among them, 10 of them were at the 3rd level of the Origin Emperor realm. Suddenly, their hand seals changed. Suddenly, the shadows of beasts appeared in the space around them. Their huge ferocious heads wreaked havoc in the courtyard. Their ferocious auras caused the souls of those who saw them to feel a piercing pain. Roar! When the shadows of the beasts were formed, the light in their eyes was cold and gloomy. Their huge bodies instantly occupied a large part of the void, and their auras shook the heavens. Ka-ka! On the opposite side, the beasts surrounded them. The terrifying energy that spread out caused countless spatial cracks to appear in the surrounding space. Looking at such a terrifying power from afar, all the disciples of the imperial palace were frightened. Immediately there was a flash of joy. With such a power spreading out, it seemed like this battle was finally going to end. Muyang, be careful. Let me help you. Seeing that the situation wasn't right, Duguyuma's face instantly tensed up. 10 Origin Emperor Realm experts and 20 Origin Void Realm experts. Situ Muyang had just reached the 6th level of the Origin Emperor Realm. It wasn't easy for him to resist until now. In the void, Situ Muyang looked indifferent. He opened his arms and the snow-white armor wrapped around his body again. His eyes instantly became clear and tranquil. A faint smile appeared on Situ Muyang's face as he said with a smile, "Sister, back off. 30 experts, what's there to be afraid of? Let me show you the new move that I have comprehended." Situ Muyang's cry erupted once again after his voice sounded. Immediately, his body twisted and an energy aura that was like a spatial storm surged around Situ Muyang's body. Everywhere it passed, the surrounding space collapsed inch by inch and cracks continued to appear. What is this brat doing? What a powerful soul energy! Does this brat have another move? Come on, don't lose to him. Below, thousands of eyes were trembling. Situ Muyang's aura had become more terrifying. Was this really the power of a 6th-level Origin Emperor Realm expert? In the void, Situ Muyang instantly closed his eyes and stood proudly in the storm. The domineering aura between his eyebrows instantly infected everyone present. Go! Among the 30 experts, the leading disciple wielded his long sword and slashed at Situ Muyang's head. In an instant, 30 rays of light fell from the sky like meteors and crushed Situ Muyang's body instantly. Boom! A thunderous explosion resounded through the sky, and the surging soul energy directly shattered the space above the peak of the central quake into pieces, withered away piece by piece. Muyang, Duguyuma and a few experts from the Myriad Sword Alliance rushed forward. Halfway through, they suddenly stopped. The ferocious energy rays stopped halfway around Situ Muyang and were unable to move forward. Buzz, buzz. As the rays of light dissipated, Situ Muyang made his move under everyone's gaze. He raised his cold eyes slightly and suddenly pushed his hands horizontally. The power of the storm that surrounded his body resounded in the heavens and earth. Wind Feather Sword Essence. Jade Frost Technique. In the next moment, Situ Muyang raised his hand gently and the huge storm around him had already turned into countless ferocious and strange sword shadows. Along with the extreme frost energy, it started to snow heavily in the peak of the peak. Boom! The 10 gigantic beasts seemed to have met a formidable opponent. Under the sky full of sword shadows, they could no longer move and soon turned into light fragments. Chapter 23:57. Following that, Situ Muyang's sword wave overpowered the 30 people's energy. Like a ferocious warrior's strongest counterattack, the endless sword intent of wind and snow collapsed on the bodies of the 30 experts. What? The 30 experts saw that the sword essence was right in front of them, but their hands and feet were bound. They could only watch as they turned into broken leaves and shot back to the ground. Bang! 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 Following a series of explosions, the 30 powerhouses were defeated. It was a complete defeat. In front of the central peak, all eyes in the distant space were focused on this youth with monstrous combat strength. Looking at Situ Muyang's appearance, was he really only 16 or 17 years old? Situ Muyang stood calmly in the air. His eyes were pure as if they had been cleansed by the wind and snow. Situ Muyang felt that he had crossed the line as he looked at the people of Heavenly Palace who were howling on the ground. Muyang, you managed to cultivate the Wind Feather Sword in the Myriad Sword Mountain? Duguyuma rushed up with his eyes wide open. It was as if he was looking at a monster. Situ Muyang scratched his head and said softly, Junior granduncle is so powerful that I had to hide in the Myriad Sword Mountain and practice like a madman. Grandfather only let me out because I managed to make some progress recently. Hearing this, Duguyuma shook his head and looked at Situ. He sighed and said, No wonder Second Elder likes you so much. Whoosh, whoosh. Snowflakes filled the sky and it was bone-chilling. The entire heavenly palace had turned into a world of frost and snow. At this moment, everyone present felt a chill in their hearts when they looked at the young man from the Myriad Sword Alliance. They were no less terrified than the flying snow in front of them. How did he manage to cultivate the wind feather sword? Could it be that everyone who was with Su-Yi was a monster? I'm sorry. Brothers, I'm sorry for messing up the drive the Heaven River in a moment of excitement. I apologize for that. Situ Muyang's attitude was sincere as he repeatedly apologized. However, when he looked at the people from Heavenly Palace below him, they felt even more terrified. Duguyuma hurriedly stopped Situ Muyang, shook his head and said softly, Aren't you rubbing salt on his wound? Forget it, let's not compete anymore. Let's wait for Su-Yi here. Situ Muyang seemed to have understood something. Like a child who had done something wrong, he stood upright in the void and said softly, Then what about the matter that grandfather asked me to do? That will depend on your junior martial granduncle. It's best if you don't come to Imperial Palace in the future. Duguyuma chuckled. Together with the other experts of the Myriad Sword Alliance, they pushed their palms forward and rays of blazing blue light shone. Streams of scorching hot aura seeped into the void, causing everyone's eyes to light up for no reason. Even their souls began to thaw. Who? After a long time, the onlookers began to pant heavily. The scene just now was too strange. Looking at Situ Muyang in the air, the people of Heavenly Drive Palace didn't dare to face him head-on. Rather than saying that they wanted to challenge him again, it was more like they didn't want to embarrass themselves again. From 10 people to 20 people, then to 30 people, they were all beaten back by Situ Muyang. If more people from Imperial Palace were to join the battle, it would be a disgrace even if they won. Sigh. The sound of people sucking in their breaths filled the entire area. Thousands of disciples stiffened as they watched the snow in the sky turn into water droplets and drift away. No one spoke and no one dared to speak. In the pavilion, there were only 2 kinds of emotions, shock and cursing. They were shocked that Situ Muyang was so talented, and they were angry that 30 people couldn't even defeat a young man. Sword Will. Long Pashan, who had a loud voice, lowered his voice for the first time when he saw Situ Muyang's move. All the elders present were silent. Their livid eyes were fixed on Jun Haotian and Gu Yu, who were standing by the window. Imperial Palace can't be left alone. I'll go and challenge him. I hope that Su-Yi won't blame me for bullying him. Jun Haotian looked at Palace Master Gu. Although he was also stunned by Situ Muyang's talent, he was still the senior brother of Imperial Palace. He couldn't embarrass Imperial Palace. Gyue took a deep breath and said softly, This kid is talented, but he doesn't have a sharp edge. It's really rare. This kid isn't challenging anymore. If you go and win, it won't be a good thing. Do you want people to say that our Imperial Palace is narrow-minded, or do you want us to take out your trump card to control the situation? Immediately, all the elders were silent. Elder Gyue smiled and said softly, The challenge is just an interlude. The real main character will appear soon. Isn't Su-Yi cultivating? Why is it so fast? Jun Haotian asked. Gyue looked into the distance and looked at Tunten, who was as black as a mountain. He said, Brother Kwanga has been in there for a while. Do you think the desolate engulfing heavenly beast won't tell Su-Yi about the chaos in the front peak? The timing is just right. It's best to leave some room for imagination in this battle. Palace Master, you're very thoughtful. Luo Wuya and the others nodded. The time was almost up. Imperial Palace had only sent some elite disciples. To be honest, none of their core disciples had gone up yet. No one had lost face. Gyue and the elders were waiting for Su-yi to come out. They were waiting for the Myriad Sword Alliance's real goal to surface. In the depths of the pavilion, an incomparably rich and exotic fragrance surged out, and an incomparably enormous amount of energy seeped out through the walls, drawing the attention of all the elders present. Dan Honggong held the pillbox in his hand and shouted at Elder Gyue like a crazy experimenter, "It's done! It's done! It's done?" The elders' faces were filled with excitement. Dan Honggong was naturally refining a pill that could restore one's physical body. Dan Honggong held the jade box in his hand and was overjoyed. He said loudly, "Spiritual materials are indeed spiritual materials. It's really easy to refine. This is definitely my proudest masterpiece." Immediately, opening the jade box, a sky-green medicinal aura shrouded everyone through the small gap. The elders' eyes lit up when they smelled the medicinal aura. They felt extremely comfortable, as if their bodies were about to go limp. Roar. At the same time, Tunten once again erupted with a terrifying, formless aura. She opened her mouth and spat out a torrential wave of energy that swept across the sky. This is... The earth-shattering commotion instantly shocked everyone present. Under their fearful gazes, a green figure appeared in front of Tunten. Standing in the air, the green figure was extremely fast. His body seemed to have merged with heaven and earth. A domineering aura rushed into the sky. Sect Master Su. It's Sect Master Su. The real powerhouse of Imperial Palace is here. Chapter 2358. Kid, your martial granduncle is here. Do you still dare to fight? The people of Yutian Palace who regained their senses collectively cheered, shouting excitedly towards the green figure that was like a storm, and did not forget to hoot a few words towards Situ Muyang in their excitement. Once Su-yi returned, everyone immediately seemed to have a backbone, and the spirit between their brows also finally returned. Young martial granduncle! Situ Muyang cheered in surprise, shouting loudly towards the green-robed figure that was flying over. At this time, Su-yi stood in the air, gazing at Situ Muyang with a slight smile. His gaze slowly swept across the entire place. Raising his eyelids, he said, "Stinking brat, did you come to my Yutian Palace to show off?" I accidentally caused it to be like this. Young martial granduncle, don't blame me." Situ Muyang laughed honestly, looking at Su-yi whose aura covered the sky and earth. He could not help but be shocked in his heart. Opposite, Su-yi made a hand gesture towards Situ Muyang, the corners of his mouth full of smiles, and said, "I heard that your sword intent is quite powerful. Come on. Use your full strength, let me take a look." Situ Muyang was immediately a little embarrassed, and said in a serious voice, "Young martial granduncle, are you sure? This sword intent of mine is quite famous." Seeing Situ Muyang say this, Su-yi also had the intention to give it a try, and immediately said, "Less nonsense. Hurry up." At this time, Suruga's figure also landed in the crowd, slightly sizing up Su-yi in front of people, a hint of praise flashing across his eyes. Suruga was naturally clear that cultivating in the desolate swallowing heaven-shocking beast, even with his guidance, the heavenly wind sword intent was not that easy to get started with. Su-yi, who could not comprehend the heavenly wind sword intent, absolutely would not let go of any opportunity to cultivate sword intent. "Then you be careful, young martial granduncle." Situ Muyang's face instantly turned cold, and a cold shout came out again. A bone-chilling aura rolled out. Seeing that Su-yi did not have the slightest movement to resist, Situ Muyang frowned. He had already reminded Su-yi just now. Could it be that he was looking down on him? "Young martial granduncle, I'm not the child from back then. You have to take this move." As soon as his voice fell, Situ Muyang no longer hesitated. Boundless ice aura spread out in the air, and the void that had just melted turned cold again. frost sword shadows that filled the sky were released from Situ Muyang's body. Bang! Suddenly, a thunderous sound, an aura that made one's heart trembling, for no reason, to make people to, for no reason. Boom! In an instant, the heavenly drive river trembled again, and the wind feather sword intent, even more ferocious than before, swept through heaven and earth. At this moment, the hearts of the people of the heavenly drive palace trembled. This destructive pressure was enough to make people's hearts crawl, and their souls trembled. Many of the people with low cultivations immediately turned pale and spat out blood. At the same time, the unparalleled sword intent rushed over, and Su-yi, who was surrounded by the sharp sword chi, suddenly felt his soul freeze for no reason. His body was like a fried dough twist, and he could not move at all. What a strong sword intent! Although it can't compare to the heavenly wind sword intent, it's still considered an extremely strong cultivation technique in the Tianyan continent. After a long time, Su-yi, who was in the storm, rapidly spread out the golden dragon chi, and at the same time protected his body. The corners of Su-yi's mouth curled up slightly. Having already comprehended Situ Muyang's sword intent, Su-yi had a direct feeling in his heart. His god-slaying sword might and Situ Muyang's wind feather sword were two different forms. Direct and unrestrained was the biggest flaw of his god-slaying sword might. From this, it could be seen that Su-yi's understanding of sword intent was not deep enough. In comparison, although Situ Muyang's sword intent had changed in form, it was already a huge leap and improvement. Through the activation of soul energy, changing the sword intent was definitely not something an ordinary person could do. Not bad. With this understanding, Mu Yang, you're worthy of the title of a peerless genius. In the storm, Su-yi's cold voice slowly spread out, instantly causing everyone to feel a chill in their hearts. Under such a terrifying attack, Su-yi could still remain calm and speak as he pleased? Was he looking down on people? Everyone looked at Situ Muyang, and the latter's expression changed rapidly. At this moment, even Situ Muyang's eyes surged with a trace of terror. Everyone had already seen how powerful his wind feather sword was. Now, in the face of Junior Martial Uncle's calmness, Situ Muyang actually felt that his sword intent was like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water, without the slightest lethality. Damn it! Situ Muyang's fighting spirit rose again, and all the soul energy in his mind was activated, and a powerful sword intent descended between heaven and earth once again. Chi-la. After the sword intent was activated, Situ Muyang's pupils trembled, and he felt that the sword intent in the air was no longer under his control. The figure of Su-yi in front of him instantly became incomparably tall. For a moment, Situ Muyang felt that his energy was being devoured by heaven and earth, and an even more terrifying heavenly might was collapsing on his body from the opposite side. Roar! It was unknown whether it was the sound of metal or the howl of a ferocious beast, but in a moment, all the ferocious energy in the air had disappeared, and the boundless ice energy dissipated without a trace like a gust of wind. In front of him, Su-yi stood with his hands behind his back, calmly taking a step forward. His figure was like lightning, and although it seemed slow, he was actually in front of Situ Muyang in the blink of an eye. After exhausting his soul energy, Situ Muyang's eyes were filled with shock. He looked at Su-yi as if he was looking at the ruler of heaven and earth, and his deep eyes were extremely domineering and incomparably disdainful. Looking at Situ Muyang, who was a little limp, Su-yi raised one hand and directly supported Situ Muyang. The energy in the air swept up, blowing the hair of the two people high up in the air. Junior Martial Uncle, what cultivation level have you reached? Situ Muyang's face was filled with disbelief. He really couldn't understand why he was so insignificant in front of Su-yi. The corner of Su-yi's mouth curled up as he looked at Duguyuma. The latter didn't find it strange and said softly, Your junior martial uncle is already at the first stage of the Yuan domain realm. As soon as he finished speaking, Su-yi gently raised his hand again, and the space inexplicably trembled. In the sky above, all the energy storms instantly disappeared. At that moment, Situ Muyang completely felt a kind of fear. He looked at Su-yi in shock and said faintly, "Junior martial uncle, I admit defeat." Instantly, everyone present cheered and shouted excitedly at Su-yi. The Yutian Palace's reputation had finally been reclaimed. Soon, the disciples present quickly made space for them, and Su-yi pulled Situ Muyang and the rest to the front peak of Zhongzhen Peak. The rest of the disciples tactfully retreated and didn't stay any longer. Today's competition also ended with Su-yi's victory. The brothers hugged each other tightly. Since the last time they parted, the two of them hadn't seen each other for a long time. As they shared their experiences, Situ Muyang's respect and reverence for Su-yi was even more obvious. Chapter 2359. Junior martial uncle, you're the person I admire the most in this life, no, the next life, and the life after that. None of those *T geniuses in the Myriad Sword Alliance can be compared to you. Su-yi smiled indifferently in the face of Situ Muyang's praise. Su-yi patted Situ Muyang's shoulder and looked at Duguyuma, who was standing next to Situ Muyang. He then asked softly, "Why are you guys here? Miss Yuma, didn't you just return to the Myriad Sword Alliance?" Situ Muyang and Duguyuma immediately stood up. The Myriad Sword Alliance's experts behind them also looked serious. "Junior martial uncle, it's like this. We're here this time." Situ Muyang raised his hand and gestured to the Myriad Sword Alliance's experts behind him. "Sect leader Su, it's done. It's done." At the same time, an even more shocking voice resounded from the top of the pavilion. Dozens of fierce streamers flew out from the pavilion. Gyue and Long Pashan followed closely behind Dan Honggong. Dan Honggong held the jade box in his hand and shouted excitedly like a madman. Situ Muyang, Duguyuma, and the others were shocked when they saw this. They swallowed the words that were about to come out of their mouths. "Mu Yang, we'll talk about your matter later." Su-yi's eyes lit up when he heard Dan Honggong's voice. Swish! Su-yi took a big stride forward and arrived in front of Dan Honggong in an instant. He asked loudly, "Is it really done?" Dan Honggong carefully placed the jade box in front of Su-yi. His hands were trembling and his eyes were filled with joy. His trembling beard swayed wildly like willow catkins. "Fortunately, it's done. Fortunately, it's done. Sect leader Su, this is definitely the most perfect masterpiece of my life." Dan Honggong's spittle flew everywhere. Seeing the jade box in Su-yi's hand, a trace of pain flashed through his eyes. Looking at Dan Honggong, Su-yi's heart began to beat wildly. At the same time, Qi Feihong and Ling Qianxue also stared at the box in Su-yi's hand with their eyes wide open. Through Qi Feihong and Ling Qianxue, Su-yi knew that if a soul body wanted to recover its physical body, it needed three things: serene flame flower, heavenly fragrant pistol, and moon devour Bodhi goo. However, no one knew what kind of thing the three of them would combine into. No one had ever seen it before. Holding his breath, Su-yi slowly opened the jade box. An extremely dense medicinal scent quickly drifted out along with a dazzling light. Immediately, the heaven and earth energy in the surrounding area was stirred up rapidly. Everyone present held their breaths, and everyone's Yuan Qi energy that resonated with the heaven and earth energy was stirred up. Everyone present was a primitive emperor and origin ancestor realm expert. Such a spiritual medicine could actually cause such a huge reaction to them. It could be seen how powerful the spiritual medicine was. What a powerful spiritual medicine! Now that he had recovered, his cultivation naturally improved tremendously. His cultivation was like a torrent that could not be restrained. Young Grandmaster is really amazing. I heard that he has already reached the Yuan domain realm. Situ Muyang showed an extremely envious expression. Suruga nodded. When he was cultivating his sword intent, he saw that Su Yi was only at the 7th level of Yuan Zong realm. In fact, Su Yi had already broken through to the Yuan domain realm. When they were fighting, Suruga saw it. He nodded and said, "You little guy, Su Yi was only at the 7th or 8th level of Yuan Emperor realm when he was at your age. Your speed is not slower than his." At this moment, Duguyama stepped forward leisurely and said respectfully to Suruga, "Yuma greets Yama sword." Suruga looked at Duguyama from head to toe, especially that pair of clear blue eyes. He nodded and said, "The successor of Duguxia, your sword intent is superb. You're really extraordinary." When Duguxia was mentioned, the corner of Duguyama's mouth twitched. He looked embarrassed and stepped aside. "Great Grandmaster, Sister Yuma is very powerful. She's one of the best in the Myriad Sword Alliance." Gyua looked at Situ Muyang and Duguyama and said with a smile, "If that's the case, let's have a seat at my place." Chapter 2360. Everyone followed Gyua back to the pavilion, and Jun Haotian and Duguyama chatted along the way. "Haotian, where did you go?" Duguyama looked at Jun Haotian and asked him deliberately. The palace master of Yutian Palace did not come out because he was refining medicine, but it was rude of Jun Haotian not to come out. Jun Haotian was embarrassed by the question, so he smiled and changed the topic. Duguyama smiled and shook her head. She pulled Situ Muyang and said, "Muyang, I have a good friend in Tianlansi City, Lan Yelyan. If you go to Tianlansi City in the future, remember to tell her not to come to Yutian Palace, because Brother Jun Haotian is not very enthusiastic." Hearing this, Jun Haotian stopped and looked back at Duguyama. He smiled bitterly and said, "Yuma, I have my difficulties too. If I really meet Miss Lan, you can't say that." "Just kidding. You." Duguyama smiled and quickly pulled Situ Muyang to catch up. On the pavilion, everyone sat in rows and listened to Suruga practicing the sword essence with Su Yi in Tuntun's body. Situ Muyang suddenly shouted, "Great Grand Master, did he succeed? Has little Martial Granduncle succeeded?" Su Kwanga shook his head and squinted his eyes. He said with some regret, "Sword essence can only be understood but not explained in words. Once you understand it, you understand it. Su Yi has a feeling about sword essence, but the sword essence he is practicing is so obscure that even I can only give him hints. He has not made any progress." Situ Muyang and Duguyama smiled at each other. Their eyes were full of surprise. Sitting below, Duguyama's blue eyes flashed. She pursed her lips and said, "Then, the chances are much higher." Situ Muyang and Duguyama's subtle expressions were seen by the experienced people of Yutian Palace. Gyue, who was sitting at the top, smiled and said, "Gyue has a question. Brother Kwanga is from Xinjian Gate, but this little brother is from the Myriad Sword Alliance. What's going on?" Suddenly, Su Kwanga beckoned Situ Muyang to come in front of her. Her eyes were full of love and affection. She said gently, "It all started from this boy's father. Situ Muyang's father, Situ Luyun, was married to Duguing, the beloved daughter of Duguhen, the second elder of the Myriad Sword Alliance. Back then, Situ Luyun went out to train and met Duguing. Duguing wanted to marry Situ Luyun no matter what. She even cut off all ties with the Myriad Sword Alliance for Situ Luyun, which shocked the Sword Alliance. Since then, Xinjian Gate and the Myriad Sword Alliance had cut off all ties. It was not until Situ Muyang was born that Duguhen gave up. Duguhen took a fancy to Situ Muyang's talent and summoned his grandson back to the Myriad Sword Alliance. He poured a lot of effort into Situ Muyang. Therefore, Xinjian Gate could be said to have a good relationship with the Myriad Sword Alliance because of Situ Muyang. That was why Xinjian Gate's second position in Zhongzhou was unshakable. Gyue's cloudy eyes flashed with a cold light when he heard that. He said in a low voice, "So, he's Duguhen's grandson. No wonder he's so talented. No wonder." Long Pashan, Luo Wuya, and the others were more or less embarrassed as they smiled meaningfully. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the pavilion became awkward and strange. Situ Muyang, who was standing on the side, was puzzled. Could it be that his grandfather, Duguhen, had provoked these elders? Great Martial Uncle, what happened to Grandpa? Why did Palace Lord Gyue and the others' expressions change when they heard Grandpa's name? Situ Muyang lowered his voice with a stiff expression. Suruga felt a little regretful after saying that. He shook his head and said seriously, "It's the matter of the previous generation. Tell me honestly, why did your eccentric grandpa ask you to come here?" Situ Muyang looked around and nodded solemnly. "Grandpa asked me to come here this time because," once again, before he could finish his sentence, a long, resounding howl rang out from outside the pavilion. In an instant, it was as if the entire Heavenly Rider River was hit by an earthquake. Everyone in the pavilion could not sit still and rushed to the window. At the same time, the vast square in front of the central peak was filled with rich milky white energy. Medicinal qi was mixed in and the energy surged to the heavens. It was like a paradise. "This is?" Duguyuma's blue eyes flashed and looked through the white mist. Instantly, intense shock flashed in the depths of his eyes. In the milky white immortal qi, a huge black shadow like a mountain stretched across the square. It was Tun Tun. Light surged around Tun Tun, and the surrounding mountains were dyed. The white energy was vast and majestic. It was enough to make people suck in a breath of cold air. Their eyes flashed with shock. Boom! Soon, a terrifying energy rushed out along with the light. The thundercloud eyes of the desolate swallowing heaven-shocking beast were like a volcano erupting. Lightning shot out and dyed the world. Everything turned into nothingness in an instant and spread out rapidly. "Come out!" Tun Tun shouted from the white mist. Tun Tun roared at the sky and a vast energy crashed into the sky like a meteorite. Pft! When the white mist blew slightly, a vigorous voice was heard. Then, an old man wearing a dark blue robe and a small hat flew out of the white mist. The energy around the old man was like a rope. The energy flowed in circles and the momentum was terrifying. "Who is that?" Gyue and the group of elders widened their eyes. They looked at the person who came out of Tun Tun and searched for memories of this person in their mind. Under everyone's surprised gaze, the old man's aura was heavy. His unique Yuan Qi bloomed brilliantly. His every move had the demeanor of a great expert. After passing through the white mist, the old man sat on the edge of the mountain. He took a deep breath and began to meditate. The more he looked, the more he felt something was wrong. Suruga's eyes suddenly turned cold. The memory of being hunted back then flashed through his mind like yesterday. He said softly, "This person is Qi Feihong." Qi Feihong. Gyue's eyes were filled with shock as he looked at Suruga in disbelief. Qi Feihong? The previous sect leader of the demon-subduing sect, Qi Feihong? Luo Wuya sucked in a breath of cold air and said coldly, "Everyone said that this old man had disappeared for decades. Many people said that he was already dead. Why would he appear at Su Yi's place?" Suddenly, Gyue and Suruga looked at each other and smiled. They finally understood why the demon-subduing sect was under Su Yi's control. "So it's to capture the leader first." Gyue laughed. Hearing that, everyone nodded. Their lips curled into a smile of understanding as they continued to look at the white mist. Chapter 2361. Suddenly, the heavens and earth trembled again, and an endless amount of powerful soul energy seeped out. Between the heavens and earth, 6 lightning pillars suddenly shot out from the sky. The huge energy body was like a heavenly punishment, causing the entire Heavenly Rider Creek to tremble. Boom, 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 6 consecutive huge energy movements resounded through the heavens and earth. When the 6 light pillars gathered together, the entire Zhongzhen peak instantly became dark. In the dark space, the energy created countless terrifying storms. Above the void, the lightning was like a chessboard, and the lights were scattered all over the mountains and rivers. What the hell is going on? This time, it was Suruga and Situmuyang's turn to be surprised. Facing such a terrifying phenomenon, everyone present was shocked. They clenched their fists and didn't dare to make a sound. After a few breaths, the elders present seemed to have understood something. They all took a step back with a serious expression. Instead of saying that they were shocked, it was better to say that they were respectful and solemn. "What's wrong with you guys?" Suruga frowned. At this moment, the energy outside the window was surging. Countless fierce lightning bolts were hovering in the sky, causing the sky to tremble. Gu Yu and the other elders all had solemn expressions on their faces as they half knelt on the ground and said in unison, "We welcome the birth of a 6th-rank soul master." 6th grade. As soon as they finished speaking, Situmuyang and Duguyumal were still fine, but Suruga's expression changed crazily. Soul Masters were ranked from the 1st grade to the 7th grade. The 4th grade was equivalent to the Yuan Emperor realm, and the 5th grade was equivalent to the Yuan Ancestor realm. The 6th grade was very rare in the world, and the 7th grade was a level that only existed in legends. In the entire Yutian Palace, only Duanmu Xiaoman's soul cultivation had reached the 6th grade, and her martial cultivation had reached the half-step Yuan Tian realm. Guiyue and the others had seen such a terrifying scene from Duanmu Xiaoman before. They didn't expect that the Yutian Palace would have another 6th-grade soul master. Speaking until here, everyone's eyes flickered, and there was absolute respect in their eyes. Junior Martial Uncle. It's Junior Martial Uncle. Situmuyang's expression changed greatly, and his eyes became more solemn and respectful. Suruga said in shock. Sui. Duguyuma pressed his lips tightly. He was as nervous as a spring and his mouth was dry. At this moment, under everyone's astonished gazes, an incomparably huge aura fluctuation once again erupted from the central peak. It was as if it wanted to devour all the energy in the world. An incomparably domineering aura spread throughout the air. Boom! Following an earth-shattering explosion, a man in a green robe slowly walked out of the dark space. With every step he took, countless bolts of lightning in the surrounding space trembled. It was Sui. Very quickly, when Sui walked out completely, all the energy in the surrounding space had also disappeared. It's Sui. Everyone present shouted in unison, peeking at the terrifying soul aura around his body. There was no doubt that he was a rank 6. At this moment, everyone present was extremely excited. In a short moment, they were about to pounce towards the front peak of the central quake, towards Sui. Wait! All of you, stop! Elder Gu Yu bellowed from behind. Everyone stopped in their tracks, and their eyes were filled with doubt and astonishment. Guiyue quickly walked forward and looked at the endless energy in the sky. He suppressed the excitement in his eyes and said, "There's another energy in Tun's body, and it's from an even more terrifying expert." Even more terrifying? Long Pashan and the others heard this and their faces froze. Looking at the overwhelming energy, everyone swallowed a mouthful of saliva. All the pores on their backs opened up as they waited with bated breaths. With a light shout, Sui suddenly looked up, and his calm green robe fluttered quickly. In a short moment, an inexplicable, domineering aura swept across the sky, and he turned into a stream of light and came to Qi Feihong's side. Looking at Qi Feihong, Sui nodded and took a step forward. He crossed his legs and bent his knees, and began to absorb energy from the distorted space to stabilize his cultivation. A mysterious light enveloped his body, and Sui entered a state of concentration, and soon, he was not disturbed by the outside world. Roar! As the two of them entered a state of concentration, Tun Tun once again let out an even more shocking roar, shaking the mountains and rivers. The terrifying energy in its bloody mouth rushed into the sky, and in an instant, a huge wave of demonic energy rushed into the mountains and the earth. In the dark space, an arc of light shot out, and the sky collapsed and the earth cracked, and the light rushed into the sky. An incomparably huge and shocking wind swept through the world, and in an instant, an extremely bewitching face of a beast appeared in the depths of the sky. Looking carefully, the beast's charming face was like the most perfect masterpiece of the heavens. Roar! Tun Tun and the huge beast's voices echoed across the sky, and a resounding energy explosion resounded in the sky. In the white mist and silver light, a charming and enchanting woman slowly walked out. Her figure was graceful, and her beautiful hair was stuck to her back. There was not a single flaw to be found on her graceful body, and she was incomparably alluring. As she walked out of the white mist, her mature aura and sexy lips revealed a myriad of emotions. This is another demon domain realm expert. Gyua looked at this demon expert, and he was very clear in his heart. Although this woman had bright eyes and white teeth, her ferocious cultivation aura was definitely not below the desolate devouring heaven beast. Too strong. Looking at the woman slowly walking out, the crowd could not help but exclaim in shock and fear. Seeing this scene, everyone's minds were in a mess. What was going on? Su Yi's body was hiding the previous sect leader of the demon-subduing sect, and also this demon domain realm super demon expert? And he had even become a 6th grade soul master? Looking at the vast square, the white mist in the sky began to dissipate, and ferocious energy exploded in the sky above the square, as if it was the end of the world. Su Yi is really the son of a god. The secrets he has on him are more than others in their entire lives. Everyone looked at each other, and their eyes were filled with shock and helplessness. Such a strange and terrifying thing, and this unimaginable super demon expert, caused everyone to be so shocked that they could not regain their senses for a long time. After a long while, the white mist completely dissipated, and the dark clouds dispersed. The fluctuations between heaven and earth also disappeared, and in the end it was as if nothing had happened. On the peak in front of the earthquake, a woman floated in the air like a demon saintess, and her body was shrouded in terrifying energy. Then, the woman's gaze was incomparably disdainful, and she slowly landed on the ground. But when she saw Su Yi, the woman's lips curled into a beautiful smile. Chapter 2362. Landing beside Su Yi, the woman squatted down gently, holding her hands and looking at Su Yi, who was meditating. She was so affectionate that she looked down upon the world. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air when they saw this. They were finally certain that Su Yi had been hiding such a terrifying honorable stage cultivator in his body all along. This. Should we go over now? Suruga stopped thinking and glanced back at the elders present. The elders also looked at each other awkwardly. From the looks of it, this demon venerable expert was extremely familiar with Su Yi, and seemed to have some other feelings for him. Immediately, everyone looked at Gyue, hoping that Gyue could make a decision. Duguyuma and Situmuyang, who were standing at the side, had a complicated look in their eyes. Especially Duguyuma, her red lips were tightly pursed, her curvy body was slightly tense, and her eyes were fluctuating. No need. Look, someone is more concerned about Su Yi than us. Just wait here for a moment. Gyue stroked his beard and smiled. Following Gu Yu's gaze, he looked into the distance and saw a fierce golden light shooting out from the peak after the epicenter, flying in the direction of the front peak. The golden light broke through the air at an extremely fast speed, drawing a beautiful arc in the air, moving forward quickly and dazzling. At this time, because of the dissipation of the energy of heaven and earth, Su Yi and Qi Feihong opened their eyes one after another. Wrapped in mysterious runes, Su Yi was shrouded in divine light. He raised his eyes slightly and saw the charming Ling Qianxue in front of him at first glance. Su Yi's dark and deep eyes were fixed on the amber pupils. That gaze that was enough to charm all things in the world suddenly made people's hearts beat wildly. One would be intoxicated by it if they looked at it more. No one could guess how there could be such an outstanding work of art in the world. Ling Qianxue's charming smile was like looking at the moon in the water, making people look forward to it 1,000 times. "What's wrong? We haven't seen each other for a few years. Don't you recognize me?" Ling Qianxue's watery eyes revealed a hint of anger, and her smoky eyebrows were slightly raised. Bang! Without the slightest hesitation, Su Yi suddenly stood up, spread out his powerful arms, and pulled Ling Qianxue into his embrace. Smelling the unique demonic aura on Ling Qianxue's body, Su Yi's heart finally felt like a huge stone had been lifted off the ground. The corner of his mouth hooked up into a warm smile. At this moment, a firm and warm hug, no, even 1,000,000 hugs would not be enough to express Su Yi's longing for Ling Qianxue. Su Yi being hugged by Su Yi like this, Ling Qianxue was obviously a little flustered. Her beautiful eyes were drowsy, and a wave of heart-stirring warmth touched Ling Qianxue's heartstrings. The corner of her mouth slightly curled up, and her entire body was powerless. She could only let Su Yi hug her. He slowly closed his eyes, and everything around him seemed to have stopped. It was as if everything had disappeared. There were only two of them in the world. Su Yi himself didn't know where this feeling for Ling Qianxue came from, but it really happened like this, and it was so thick and real. Smelling the seductive aura on Ling Qianxue's body, Su Yi's mind constantly recalled the past, and every scene seemed to be yesterday. For a whole 5 years, Su Yi and Ling Qianxue had been together for 5 years, but they had communicated in a strange way. Su Yi had thought about it countless times. If there was one person in this world who understood him, there was no doubt that it would be Ling Qianxue. His anger and joy were all tied up by Ling Qianxue's frown and smile. His thoughts were all alerted by Ling Qianxue's anger. From the battle with the ice and fire double-headed demonic snake to the explosion of the demon pill, then Ling Qianxue fell into a deep sleep. Finally, Ling Qianxue woke up in the Golden Rock secret realm and walked hand in hand with him in the Demon Chi forest. This was the memory of Su Yi and Ling Qianxue, and it was also a feeling that no one else could understand. Before she fell into a deep sleep, Ling Qianxue protected Su Yi. After she fell into a deep sleep, Su Yi traveled all over Sky Barbarian for Ling Qianxue. That day, Su Yi was just a cultivator with low martial arts. Now, Su Yi, who was standing in front of Ling Qianxue, was already an indomitable spirit. The current Su Yi, who could dominate the world, could finally say the words that had been in his heart for 1,000 times. "Qianxue, I've finally waited for you." His bitter and hoarse voice was mixed with excitement as he spoke slowly. As Ling Qianxue listened, her fingers moved slightly, and her whole body stiffened. Unconsciously, after saying this, Su Yi's eyes were already filled with tears. Su Yi, who no longer knew what pain was still like the little rookie from 5 years ago in front of Ling Qianxue. Just like this, Ling Qianxue was hugged tightly by Su Yi in his arms. She was lovely and moving, as quiet as an orchid. She was no longer the invincible demon domain expert. She had been stored in this man's mind for countless days, but this was the first time they had interacted so intimately. With her arms wrapped around Su Yi's chest, Ling Qianxue gradually closed her eyes. She greedily wanted to have all of Su Yi, even if it was only for a second. After a moment, Ling Qianxue still chose to break free from Su Yi's embrace. Glancing sideways at Qi Feihong, who was pretending to be asleep, Ling Qianxue's face was like a peach blossom. She said in a serious voice, "You're now the master of a sect, and you're still crying for a little cat demon like me?" Su Yi stared at her, not wanting to move away for a moment. He stared at the delicate Ling Qianxue. Su-yi knew that Ling Qianxue's soft heart and weak bones only belonged to him. He immediately smiled and said, "In front of you, if I'm still a powerhouse, then there's nothing cute about me in this world." Loquacious. Ling Qianxue immediately took a deep breath, as if spitting out all the forbearance she had endured for the past few years. She tightly held on to Su-yi's arm, her eyes shining. Qi La. In an instant, Ling Qianxue's expression changed, and a terrifying aura quickly spread out from behind her. The aura burst forth, and the entire void almost collapsed. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled, and an endless, terrifying golden aura spread out, accompanied by a mighty heavenly might that rolled endlessly. "Qianxue, put it down!" Su-yi narrowed his eyes, and immediately recognized that it was Lu Ruoxi who came from the rear peak. He signaled Ling Qianxue to relax. In the distance, Lu Ruoxi, who was flying over, also felt a fierce energy wave rushing towards her. Her figure instantly drifted back like a willow leaf. Swish! A red light flashed in the air, and in the next second, Su-yi caught her firmly and landed on the ground. Standing up, Lu Ruoxi looked at Su-yi and heaved a sigh of relief. Looking at Ling Qianxue's complicated expression, Lu Ruoxi quickly smiled and said, "Su-yi, aren't you going to introduce me?" Hearing Lu Ruoxi greeting her, Ling Qianxue felt a little guilty for her rashness just now. She immediately walked over to Lu Ruoxi and greeted her. "I didn't expect sister to be so beautiful." Lu Ruoxi smiled faintly and directly held Ling Qianxue's soft hand. She looked up at Su-yi and reprimanded, "This is the sister Qianxue you're talking about, right?" Chapter 2363. When did I say that? Su-yi's eyes widened. He suddenly became nervous and doubtful. Lu Ruoxi looked at Ling Qianxue gently and reservedly. Her lustrous eyes were filled with tenderness. She said seriously, "Did you forget what you said in your sleep?" Hearing Lu Ruoxi's words, Su-yi was petrified. Did he have the habit of talking in his sleep? He turned to look at Ling Qianxue. "Why are you looking at me?" "When you were resting, I sealed my spiritual sense." Ling Qianxue's eyes were like stars in the morning. She glanced into the distance in a panic. Her cheeks were slightly flushed, adding to her charm. "What I said is what I said." Lu Ruoxi chuckled. Seeing that the two were a little embarrassed, Lu Ruoxi's eyes flashed with a smile. She held their hands and said softly, "Sister Xiaoman once told me that all emotions are empty talk in the face of life and death. Only cherishing the people in front of you is real." Sister Xiaoman had waited for dozens of years for her brother, Qingtian. Sister Xiaoman and I have also waited for Su-yi. "Ruoxi?" Su-yi's gaze changed. He didn't expect Lu Ruoxi, who was always gentle and quiet, to say such words. "You don't have to look at me like that. I like you, Su-yi. However, your footsteps won't be limited to Sky Barbarian Realm. There are many more important things waiting for you. Sister Xiaoman is right. If you like me, don't be selfish. As long as you are here, I will be happy. Don't you think so, Sister Qianxue?" Lu Ruoxi smiled and looked at Ling Qianxue gently. A warm current flashed in Ling Qianxue's heart. As an expert of the demon race, she had always been alone when her clansmen were killed. How could she feel the warmth of the world? "Sister Ruoxi." Ling Qianxue was very touched and didn't know how to answer. "I can see that Su-yi has deep feelings for you. You must have done more for Su-yi than Sister Xiaoman and I, and not less than us. I like Su-yi, but I also hope that you will be happy. I can't be happier that someone as powerful as Big Sister likes my man." Lu Ruoxi smiled faintly. "Ruoxi, thank you." Su-yi's heart was filled with warmth. He choked on his words as his gaze fell on Lu Ruoxi. After saying that, Lu Ruoxi smiled brightly and placed Su-yi and Ling Qianxue's hands on her palm. "If elder sister Xiaoman knew that we have such a good sister, she would be so happy. Let's call each other sisters from now on." "Yes, Sister Ruoxi." Ling Qianxue no longer hesitated and laughed heartily. The two girls quickly became intimate as if they were biological sisters. Their laughter was as sweet as the song of an oriole, extremely pleasant to the ears. Seeing how happy the two of them were, Su Yi's heart was filled with an unprecedented warmth. Qi Feihong lowered his voice as if he had just woken up from a dream. He said softly, "Kid, sometimes I really envy you. The feelings of young people are really enviable." Su Yi curled the corner of his mouth and glanced at Qi Feihong. Qi Feihong in front of him had already recovered his physical body, and his strength at the peak of 9th-level Origin Grandmaster also showed signs of breaking through. He said softly, "Why don't I help you break through and find you an old companion in Taiching sect?" Suddenly Qi Feihong rolled his eyes at Su Yi, lowered his hat and said angrily, "You only know how to joke with me at a time like this. Su Yi, elder sister Xiaoman is still in seclusion. I'll bring elder sister Qianxue around Yutian Palace." The two girls chatted happily. Ling Qianxue was pulled by Lu Ruoxi and also looked at Su Yi with a smile. Looking at Lu Ruoxi and Ling Qianxue leaving, Su Yi still had a smile at the corner of his mouth. He glanced at Qi Feihong next to him and chuckled, "Let's go, Uncle Hong. I'll bring you to find your old companion." At this moment, over a dozen rays of light shot into the sky above the tall pavilion. Spiritual energy that covered the sky immediately gathered into an incomparably huge and ferocious light pillar that charged towards Qi Feihong. "Be careful." Seeing this, Su Yi squinted his eyes and held Qi Feihong tightly behind him. At the same time, Su Yi condensed a mysterious hand seal. The beast roar behind him resounded through the world and shook the eardrums. A black phantasm rushed and leaped, roaring again and pounced at the huge light beam. Boom! Tuntin, who was summoned, opened his hands. A thunderbolt light broke through the air and collided with the soul energy. Suddenly, the entire space trembled fiercely. Even the energy of heaven and earth was temporarily isolated. "Qi Feihong, give me your life!" Suruga shouted. From the collision of the light beams, a fierce sword intent that wanted to prostrate the entire place rushed into the world. In the entire sky, billowing sword waves gushed out. It was so deep that it seemed to want to split one's soul in half. It made one's heart turn cold just by looking at it. "Master!" Seeing Suruga's endless killing intent, Su Yi was dumbfounded. He signaled Tuntin to go forward and block it. Soon after, he swept his right hand and a fierce energy poured into Qi Feihong's body to help Qi Feihong escape. Bang! Between heaven and earth, the sharp sound of the sword resounded through the world. It was like a thunderous sound that shook the world and made one's heart tremble. And in the next instant, when Suruga's sword tip touched Tuntin's arm, his figure turned illusory. In a hazy light, Suruga's figure separated. The other illusory figure shot towards the fleeing Qi Feihong. The fierce sword intent descended, and a huge energy like a black hole instantly landed on Qi Feihong's body. "No!" Su Yi roared loudly. In front of him, he was already blocked by a dozen or so elders. Just now, when Lu Ruoxi and Ling Qianxue were present, no one made a move. But the moment the two girls left, Gue and Suruga immediately gave the order to pursue Qi Feihong. "Su Yi, don't make things difficult for us. It's not like you don't know what Qi Feihong and the demon-subduing sect have done before." Gue's face darkened. His turbid eyes fluctuated continuously, and an irresistible soul energy rushed out. Su Yi's eyes turned steely, and a huge pressure appeared in his heart. On the other side, the sword intent was like a tidal wave. Even if Qi Feihong used all his skills, and the huge beast image in front of him to protect him, he still couldn't resist the momentum. Boom! The space around the huge beast image cracked and shattered. Under the terrifying sword intent, the space rippled like a tsunami, turning into endless light that scattered into the world. Killing intent surged in the space, and heavens might overflowed. Bang! With a final shattering sound, Suruga's two doppelgangers returned to his original body. His long sword overflowed with cold light. He stepped forward, the tip of his sword pointed at Chi Feihong, who was lying limp on the ground. Looking at the enemy he hadn't seen for many years, Suruga's hands couldn't help but tremble. His eyes were bloodshot. Suddenly releasing the light, Suruga shouted, "Chi Feihong, long time no see." Chapter 2364. Chi Feihong, who had been defeated on the ground, had lost all his strength. Chi Feihong, who had been in the form of a soul for many years, was now pale. He was dispirited as he looked up at Suruga. His little hat had already fallen to the ground. "Suruga, it's been a long time," Chi Feihong said coldly. "Master." Seeing that Suruga was determined to kill him, Su-yi took a step forward. His eyes widened, but he was once again stopped by Gyue, who shouted, "Uncle Hong has been good to your disciple. On account of his relationship with your disciple, please spare his life." Suruga turned around and raised his eyebrows. A violent, killing intent and domineering aura erupted like a volcano. He shouted coldly, "How can I forgive you for helping the evildoer? Have you forgotten about Master Qingtian? Has your wife, Duanmu Xiaoman, waited for decades in vain? And me, Suruga's lifetime of hatred, are you going to let it go just like that?" Suruga sucked in a breath of cold air and stared fiercely at Chi Feihong. The cold light of his sword cut across Chi Feihong's face. Blood flowed down the blade. Seeing this, Su-yi seemed to have lost his mind. He murmured, I can't forget anything. The Long family has done so much evil. How can I forget so much hatred?" As soon as he finished speaking, Su-yi's heart was tangled up. Qi Nu's injury and Shangguan Tianqian were still in the hands of the Long family. No one would be able to forget this enmity. Back then, when Duanmu Qingtian was escaping from being hunted down, Su Kuanga had only saved Duanmu Qingtian's life, but she was also seriously injured. Her meridians were damaged, and her appearance changed drastically. If there was anyone to blame, they could only blame the demon-subduing sect for committing such a heinous crime. Speaking of which, this was a grudge between Suruga and Chi Feihong. Licking his dry lips, Su-yi was also a little hesitant. Was it because of the feelings he had with Chi Feihong that caused him to deviate from his path? Countless thoughts flashed through Su-yi's mind. He clenched his fists tightly and gritted his teeth. However, he still remembered what Chi Feihong had said on the peak before the earthquake. Chi Feihong said in front of Ling Qianxue that they were of one mind to kill the Long family together. But these words, in such an occasion, who would believe it? In the distance, Chi Feihong struggled to support himself with his elbows on the ground. He looked at Su-yi weakly and then looked back at Suruga. What happened back then has long since turned to dust. Now that both you and I are in our twilight years, it's time to put an end to it. But can you listen to me for a moment? Not an explanation, but a heartfelt one? Staring at Chi Feihong, Suruga withdrew his sword after a long while. A sharp aura once again surged in the air. A dying man's words are kind. Let's see what you can say. Suruga's eyes darkened. A cold light flashed past the corners of his eyes as he said coldly. Chi Feihong crawled up from the ground and took a few deep breaths as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. After that, he glanced at Su-yi and said, I shouldn't have remained in this world since a long time ago. It's all thanks to Su-yi that I was able to escape calamity. Yes, the demon-subduing sect has done many things for the Long family. But the words of a lowly person carry little weight. In this Tianyan continent where the strong are always strong, how much can the demon-subduing sect resist? Instantly, Chi Feihong's short body curled up slightly. He looked at Elder Gyue and the rest. Your Yutian palace seems to have been established overnight and can be independent of the world. What about us? Yuzhou is barren. Do you know how many people worked hard to establish the demon-subduing sect? How can I let it fall into my hands? Hearing Qi Feihong's words, Elder Gue became a little unnatural. The eyes of the elders behind him flashed. Indeed, as Qi Feihong said, the Yutian palace was detached from the aristocratic families and forces. It was like a sect that had been established overnight. It was so powerful that no one dared to provoke it. The origin of the Yutian palace had always been a mystery in the Tianyan continent. Sister Yuma, do you know the origin of the Yutian palace? Situ Muyang looked at the myriad sword alliances experts behind him and asked Duguyuma in a low voice. Duguyuma did not expect things to develop to this stage. She shook her head and remained silent. Behind her, the myriad sword alliances experts crossed their arms and exchanged glances. They were confused by the sudden turn of events. Continue talking about yourself. Don't mention the Yutian palace. Gue frowned and said softly. Qi Feihong nodded, twitched the pale corners of his mouth, and continued, Su Kuanga, I was ordered to kill Duanmu Qintian back then. I have seen Duanmu Qintian in your Yutian palace. You can ask him yourself whether I continued to do so or not. I admit that the demon-subduing sect's despicable deeds in the following decades were related to my lack of control. But I just want to say something to you. Ignoring Suruga's powerful aura, Qi Feihong's fighting spirit rose inexplicably. He exchanged glances with Su Yi and said softly, This brat has always been rash. But he taught me one thing. What I don't want to do is not what I want to do. How many people can remain untainted in this chaotic world? Now, I'm willing to use my blood to challenge Draconis. This heart was exchanged for decades of waiting. If you think I deserve to die, I'll surrender. But I don't want you to look at me and the demon-subduing sect like that. Unyielding and unparalleled arrogance. Uncle Hong. Su Yi's gaze trembled. A strong fighting spirit rose from the depths of his heart. Damn it. Why is this old grandpa so brave? I want to cry. Situ Muyang felt tears welling up in his eyes as he looked at Su Yi. On the opposite side, Suruga's cold gaze flickered. He held the tip of his sword for a long time and pointed it at Qi Feihong. After a long time, he finally lowered it. You've taken in a good brother. Suruga's cold gaze turned into helplessness and killing intent. Master! Su Yi exclaimed. He broke free from Gue and the others and rushed to Uncle Hong's side. He looked at Suruga. Su Kuanga smiled slightly and put away her long sword. The fierce and boundless killing intent also disappeared in an instant. She turned around and said faintly, Qi Feihong, remember what you said today. If there's any falsehood, I'll kill you. Since you've treated Ir well, if there's any falsehood, I'll kill you too. It's the same for everyone. After saying that, Suruga strode forward with his head held high. A chilling sword intent burst out from his body. He glanced at Duguyama and the myriad sword alliance's disciples behind him and snorted. Suruga walked to Elder Gue and said softly, Brother Gue, I'm sorry for troubling you today. Let's go and have some tea. I'm old and my back hurts when I move. My pleasure. Brother Kuanga, this way please. Gue laughed loudly. He glanced at the crowd and paused for a few seconds on the myriad sword alliance. He then led Elder Wang and Suruga to the other side of Zhongzhen Front Peak. Chapter 2365. Only Su Yi, Suruga, and the people from the myriad sword alliance were left in the huge Zhongzhen Front Peak. Uncle Hong, what you just said, doesn't sound like your usual style? Su Yi smiled bitterly. The light on his palm slowly flowed into Qi Feihong's body. Qi Feihong's eyes trembled when the vitality Qi entered his body. He smiled bitterly and said, I've been with you for a long time and I've regained some of my courage. I'll do my best to fight against the Long family. I'll kill all the dragon sins and restore the reputation of the demon-subduing sect. As soon as he finished speaking, Qi Feihong's gaze turned fierce, and a strand of surging battle intent surged wantonly like raging flames that incinerated the world. Me too. I'll help Junior Granduncle to kill all those bastards. Sister Yuma, don't you agree? Situ Muyang's blood was boiling as he listened to Duguyuma. His battle intent surged like a small volcano as he stared at Duguyuma. A few experts from the Myriad Sword Alliance coughed and whispered, Miss Yuma, now that there's no one here, can we talk to sect leader Su? Duguyuma nodded and walked to Qi Feihong's side. She waited for Su Yi to stabilize Qi Feihong's injuries. Miss Yuma, what's the matter? Su Yi slowly opened his eyes and Qi Feihong stood up and looked at Duguyuma. To tell you the truth, the elders of the Sword Alliance have requested that you make a trip to the Myriad Sword Alliance. Duguyuma's eyes shone with blue light. She continued when she saw that Su Yi and Qi Feihong did not believe her. Do you still remember the Sword Master inviting you to the Myriad Sword Mountain to refine the demon sword during the Tianfeng ranking battle? Duguyuma stared at Su Yi. Su Yi nodded. At that time, it wasn't just Duguqing, even Yen Mietian had invited him to the Pagoda Sea of Flames to train his devil sword. Unfortunately, the sacred Sea of Flames was unable to melt the Crimson Dragon devil sword. Situ Muyang stood beside Duguyuma and looked at Su Yi with sincerity. Lord Sword Master wants us to ask you to destroy the demon sword. He also has something important to discuss with you. Immediately, Su Yi's eyes darkened. He exchanged glances with Qi Feihong, and a trace of doubt and suspicion flashed in the depths of his eyes. The war is coming, and the Myriad Sword Alliance is the only one who hasn't expressed their stance yet. Could it be that they're trying to get on my good side? Su Yi muttered to himself as he looked at Situ Muyang and Duguyuma. His impression of Duguqing started to recollect. Duguqing, the leader of the Myriad Sword Alliance, had always been the most cunning among the 5 aristocratic families. There was no free lunch in the world, and Su Yi wouldn't be able to get anything out of Duguqing. Duguqing had spent a lot of effort to get Situ Muyang and Duguyuma to look for him, which made Su Yi suspicious. Naturally, Su Yi wouldn't directly ask Situ Muyang and Duguyuma about these doubts. Qi Feihong's voice gradually came from beside him. Su Yi, what do you think? Do you want to go or not? Su Yi took a deep breath and looked into Duguyuma's eyes. Situ Muyang quickly came up and patted Su Yi's shoulder. He said softly, Junior Martial Uncle, what are you waiting for? The Sword Master and Grandfather must be on your side, so Sister Yuma and I are here to invite you. Sect Master Su, you should know the Sword Master's intentions. The Myriad Sword Alliance is sincere and we hope Sect Master Su can accept it. The experts from the Myriad Sword Alliance echoed. Yuma, what do you think? Su Yi didn't answer and looked at Duguyuma. Duguyuma was the one who knew the Myriad Sword Alliance the best, so she was very familiar with Duguqing and the group of old men. Duguyuma's eyes moved slightly and her face was covered with frost. She looked at Su Yi and said, I've never seen the Myriad Sword Alliance put in so much effort this time. The Sword Master isn't someone who can't see the situation clearly. No matter what decision you make, Su Yi, I'll stand on your side. The corners of Su Yi's mouth curled up slightly when he heard this. He immediately asked the Sword Alliance experts behind him, All right, since Miss Yuma has said so, then I'll go. I can't let others look down on me, Su Yi. Su Yi Duguyuma was stunned. She didn't expect Su Yi to agree so quickly. In fact, Su Yi was able to win mainly because of Situ Muyang and Duguyuma. That's great. Junior Martial Uncle, you haven't been to the Myriad Sword Alliance for so many years. I'll accompany you this time. Aren't you cultivating your sword essence? My sword essence was cultivated in the Myriad Sword Mountain. When we form an alliance, you can also cultivate your sword essence in the myriad sword mountain. Situ Muyang was like a little sparrow that kept talking to Su-yi. When Su-yi agreed, Situ Muyang was so excited that he was about to jump up and down. Duguyuma, who was standing by the side, frowned. She looked at Su-yi with a faint smile, but her heart was filled with worry. Later, Situ Muyang and Duguyuma stayed in Jutian Palace under Su-yi's arrangement. After Su-yi had made all the necessary arrangements, they headed to the Myriad Sword Alliance together. The night wind blew gently and the moon was clear. On the path behind the epicenter of the epicenter, Qi Feihong walked in front with his back hunched. He kept muttering to himself, "This Duguqing is a fence-sitter. I don't believe that he'll be so decisive as to stand on your side. Who knows what he's up to with the demon refinement sword?" Su-yi crossed his arms and rested his head on the back of his head. His eyes were unusually bright as he looked at the undulating waves in the forest in the distance. "I don't care what he's up to. I've been everywhere. If I can win over the Long family, I'll have the upper hand." After saying that, Su-yi's eyes flashed with coldness. He said seriously, however, "If the Myriad Sword Alliance is up to something, I don't mind turning the Myriad Sword Alliance into the Second Divine Tiger Sect." The cold, murderous intent lingered in the forest. The moonlight shone on the undulating path, reflecting the silver light. Under the moonlight, Su-yi's face became unusually cold. In Su-yi's heart, he naturally hoped that the Myriad Sword Alliance would make the right choice. When he thought of Situ Muyang's innocent and excited face, he knew that Situ Muyang would be the one who would suffer the most if it came to that. "Let's go and see Grandpa and Father first. You can't mention anything about this." Qi Feihong sighed. There was a trace of worry on his haggard face as he nodded heavily. Soon after, the two of them went to the Su family's courtyard under the moonlight. The Su family's courtyard was brightly lit and lively. The return of Su Jingyuan and Su-yi made the Su family's courtyard, which had not been lively for a long time, as if it was the new year. Chapter 2366. Su family's courtyard. Su-yi and Qi Feihong walked in at the same time. Su Jingyuan and Su Jingting put down their bowls and chopsticks and happily walked up to them. The Su and Lu families were now living in Yutian Palace. With these old friends, Su Yuntian was very happy every day and his spirit was much better than before. Su Yuntian laughed and sat at the head of the table. His beard was white but his spirit was abnormally hale and hearty. "Grandfather." Su-yi's gaze swept across the crowd and he smiled. He greeted his father, uncle, father-in-law, and the others one by one. Of course, Su-yi also introduced Qi Feihong to everyone. When they heard that Qi Feihong was the person who accompanied Su-yi through life and death many times, they couldn't help but look at Qi Feihong with respect. Seeing that Qi Feihong was about the same age as Su Yuntian, the straightforward Su Yuntian directly pulled Qi Feihong to his side, and the two began to drink happily. Looking at the happy Su and Lu families, Su-yi's heart was filled with warmth as the painful memories of Manqing were no longer visible on their faces. The happier they were, the more determined Su-yi was. The matter of going to the Myriad Sword Alliance must not be told, but there were two people he must tell. One was Lu Ruoshi, and the other was Ling Qianxue. Duanmu Xiaoman was still in seclusion. He might not be able to see her after returning from the Myriad Sword Alliance, so there was no need for Su-yi to mention it. After asking everyone, Lu Ruoshi and Ling Qianxue were strolling around the Guanlan Pavilion at the back of the mountain. Su-yi informed everyone and went to the Guanlan Pavilion. The moon was white and the wind was clear. The waterfall flowed down from the mountain. Before he reached the Guanlan Pavilion, Su-yi heard two silvery bell-like laughter passing through the space. It was very pleasant to hear. "What's so funny? Tell me about it." Su-yi stood at a high place, his eyes full of smiles as he looked at Lu Ruoxi and Ling Qianxue. Gazing at the two women, one had a graceful figure, her figure was ethereal like a goddess, and two crescent moons hung on her snow-white face. The other had a jade nose, jade cheeks, delicate dimples that were sparkling like jade, and a waist that was slender like a willow tree. She was so beautiful that it was enough to make all men in the world suffocate. The two of them stood under the moonlight, and their beauty was already the most beautiful scene in the world. Hearing Su Yi's voice, the corner of Ling Qianxue's mouth curled up slightly. Her pink cheeks slightly blushed, and her eyes were like a serene immortal orchid at the bottom of a deep valley. She said in a low voice, "We were talking about your childhood scandal. I didn't expect that Su Yi, who has always been eloquent, would have such a secret." "My business." Su Yi's gaze flickered. Lu Ruoxi was his childhood sweetheart. Yet, she did not even want to talk about him. "Ruoxi, what did you say about me? Why can't I remember?" Su Yi put his hands on his waist, and pretended to reprimand Lu Ruoxi, who was staring at him with affection. Seeing this, Lu Ruoxi held Ling Qianxue's arm even tighter. Her lips curled up slightly as she complained, "Why should I tell you the secret between me and Qianxue? Sister Qianxue, don't you think so?" Ling Qianxue, who was at the side, chuckled and snorted at Su Yi with Lu Ruoxi. Then, they laughed tacitly. Su Yi could not help but smile. This pair of sisters had only known each other for a few hours, and they actually treated him as an outsider. If he went out for a period of time, he was afraid that he would not be able to keep his position as the head of the family. "All right, you guys are ganging up to bully me. Then I'll leave and not come back." Su Yi raised his head and turned to look at the moon that was like a jade plate. Swoosh! Swoosh! Ling Qianxue and Lu Ruoxi swept past and quickly came to Su Yi's side. They held on to Su Yi's arms from both sides. Ling Qianxue said, "Stingy guy, are you really angry?" "Yes, I'm just playing with you. Where do you want to go when you just came back?" "You're not allowed to go anywhere." Lu Ruoxi's beautiful face hid a trace of nervousness and seriousness in the depths of her eyes. She unconsciously held on to Su Yi even tighter, as if she was afraid that Su Yi would leave. Su Yi raised his eyebrows and shrugged helplessly. There was a beautiful moon in front of him, and he had a beautiful woman by his side. Only a fool would go out and take risks. However, there were some things that had to come. After letting out a long sigh, Su Yi told Ling Qianxue about the purpose of Situ Muyang and Duguyuma's visit. He also told them that he had already agreed to go to the Myriad Sword Alliance. "Duguqing doesn't look like a good person," Ling Qianxue said coldly. In Su Yi's spiritual consciousness, Ling Qianxue had seen Duguqing before. His deep eyes hid shrewdness and cunning. Sister Qianxue said that Duguqing isn't a good person. "Su Yi, you don't have to go." Lu Ruoxi felt wronged. Her eyebrows moved slightly as she pressed her pink cheeks against Su Yi's arm. She was a little sad. Su Yi shook his head. He only had the Yun family, the Thunderfire Holy Palace, the Demon-Subduing Sect, the Chaos Territory, and the Heavenly Palace. Whether or not the remaining miscellaneous forces combined would be able to contend against the Long family was a problem. After so many years of painstaking effort, the Long family's strength was so terrifying that even Yun Zhongli and Yen Mietian did not dare to directly cause trouble. Moreover, the Long family had the extraterritorial elite and various top forces, including the Sky Dragon sect, under them. At this time, if Su Yi could win over the Myriad Sword Alliance, victory would be in his hands. "Then I'll go with you." "With me and Tunton, you shouldn't be in danger." Ling Qianxue looked at Su Yi with indescribable worry in her eyes. Su Yi turned his head and looked at Ling Qianxue. In the end, he still chose to shake his head. "After you resurrect, you have more important things to do. Have you forgotten?" Su Yi said lightly. Ling Qianxue nodded, indicating that she knew what Su Yi was talking about. Ling Lanin and Su Tianke were looking for the secret of the immemorial catastrophe. Now that he had resurrected, he naturally had to help Ling Miaoyin and the others who were still in the demon aura forest recover their physical bodies. The serene flame grass, glazed sky stamen, and moon-devouring Bodhi vermin had been planted in the spiritual field. The spiritual materials grew in the spiritual field over and over again. The current quantity and the leftover from refining were enough to resurrect Ling Miaoyin and the others. What Ling Qianxue had to do was wait for Dan Honggong to finish refining all the materials and bring them back to the demon aura forest. But you're also very important, Ling Qianxue said anxiously. Su Yi broke free from their arms and took a step forward. He turned around and looked at Ling Qianxue and Lu Ruoxi. The battle with the Long family is inevitable. Our forces must be gathered immediately. Perhaps after I return, the battle will erupt. Therefore, the time that Qianxue gave you is not enough. Su Yi told the two that Qi Feihong would not follow him to the Myriad Sword Alliance. He also had to gather the Soul Sect and Martial Arts Sect and prepare to go to the Demon Subduing Sect. At the same time, he had to go to the Chaos region to inform the Green Emperor and the others that the cultivation in the Chaos region was about to end. The time to test their strength had finally arrived. Chapter 2367. Therefore, Qianxue, what you need to do is urgent. With Tunton in the Myriad Sword Alliance, I'll be fine. Su Yi smiled. He tried his best not to let Ling Qianxue and Lu Ruoxi notice the seriousness in his eyes. He had already reached the first stage of the Origin Dominion realm. Coupled with the desolate engulfing heavenly beast, it would not be easy for the Myriad Sword Alliance to play any trick. All right. Be careful in the Myriad Sword Alliance. I'll rush back from the Demon Aura Forest as soon as possible. If the Myriad Sword Alliance is up to no good, the 9 Spiritual Links clan is not to be trifled with. Suddenly, Ling Qianxue shot out a cold light. A surge of demonic aura swept across the sky and engulfed the void. Su Yi nodded. Su Xiaoshui was still searching for the secrets of the Archean calamity in Sky Barbaric Country to retrieve his memories. Ling Lanin and Su Tianke were also in the extraterritorial region. The remaining Duanmu Qintian and Duanmu Xiaoman were recuperating, while the other was in seclusion. Before the war, all the combat forces had to be gathered together. The war was about to begin. Under the bright moonlight, Ling Qianxue's gaze was grave. Lu Ruoxi's face was also filled with worry. She softly said to Su Yi, can you bring me there? No. Su Yi frowned and rejected her without hesitation. Lu Ruoxi immediately looked at Ling Qianxue for help. Ling Qianxue pursed her lips slightly. Lu Ruoxi pleaded, Su Yi, I'm your wife, but I've been hiding in the Yutian Palace. I'm not a weak woman who will only wait for your return. Lu Ruoxi was the 9th holy maiden of the sacred mountain. However, after she arrived at the Yutian Palace, she was heavily protected by her father and Duanmu Xiaoman. Lu Ruoxi once thought that she could only wait for Su Yi's return and could not help Su Yi at all. A sense of helplessness and inferiority took root in her heart. Sister Qianxue has something important to do, but I'm fine. I can go with you. I can take care of myself. Lu Ruoxi frowned as she looked at Su Yi. Instantly, Su Yi's heart ached. A trace of helplessness and worry flashed across his deep eyes. In the end, he shook his head. Why? Lu Ruoxi was so anxious that she was about to cry. She heard Su Yi say, Ruoxi, there are some things that I can't tell you. However, you are the most precious thing to me. I can't let any harm come to you. After saying that, Su Yi walked toward Lu Ruoxi and extended his palm. Lu Ruoxi's face immediately turned cold. Golden light flickered beneath her feet as she tore through space and dodged the attack. I'm not a useless person. Beside you, Su Yi, I'm not a little girl who only knows how to wait and hope. Lu Ruashi's tears streaked across the night sky after she finished speaking. The golden light pressed down on the sky, and Lu Ruashi's beautiful figure blended into the night sky. It's been hard on you. Ling Qianxue sighed softly as she looked at Su Yi. Su Yi stared blankly in the direction that Lu Ruashi disappeared. His eyes were full of seriousness. He definitely could not let Lu Ruashi know that she was a rainbow exquisite egg. If Lu Ruashi knew the truth, the matter of her mother being killed by the foreign experts would be exposed. Her mother's death was the real reason why Lu Ruashi had painstakingly cultivated for so many years. At that time, Lu Ruashi would not be afraid of the Long family. He was only afraid that the foreign experts would do the same evil thing to Lu Ruashi. Su Yi would definitely not allow such a consequence to happen. He would not allow even the slightest possibility of it happening. This was the real reason why Lu Zongyuan and Duanmu Xiaoman protected Lu Ruashi. However, Su Yi could only bury these thoughts in his heart. After a long sigh, Su Yi finally shook his head. He would rather hurt Lu Ruashi's heart now than see her get hurt in the slightest. Qianxue, the person who understands me the most is indeed you. Su Yi bitterly smiled. Ling Qianxue walked forward and whispered softly. She gently hugged Su Yi tightly. In the night sky, the atmosphere between the two gradually began to stir. You are also my most precious thing. You can't be hurt either. I will rush back as soon as possible. Su Yi nodded and narrowed his eyes. His abyss-like eyes were fixed on the depths of the night sky. He softly said, You will take care of Ruashi tonight. Behind him, Ling Qianxue's amber eyes revealed a trace of gentleness as she meekly nodded. A few days passed by slowly. Qi Feihong and Ling Qianxue also left the palace according to Su Yi's arrangements. They agreed that after Su Yi returned from the Myriad Sword Alliance, regardless of whether the Myriad Sword Alliance agreed to help him or not, the battle between Su Yi and the Long family would begin. During this period, Su Yi carried out the final special training for the people of the Tian Yao school. He gave the spiritual liquid in the ancient bell to Hu Qi and the others so that they could quickly cultivate under the guidance of Long Pasan and Jun Haotian. When Shangguan Shiwei heard that Su Yi was leaving the palace again, she was also very nervous. However, after knowing that her father, Shangguan Tianqian, was about to return, Shangguan Shiwei's heart gradually relaxed. Of course, this was all a white lie from Su Yi. In his heart, he was already very anxious. For a few days, Lu Ruashi acted like a child and didn't see anyone. Even when she rested at night, she didn't let Su Yi into her room. Su Yi knew Lu Ruashi's temper very well. She was soft on the outside but tough on the inside. However, even if she was angry, Su Yi would never bring Lu Ruashi out. Before leaving, Su Yi specially instructed Lu Zongyuan and the others to strictly protect Lu Ruashi. Just in case, Su Yi also brought Jun Haotian this time. Elder Gyue also wanted to come along, but Su Yi still refused. Firstly, Xiao Man wasn't here and the gathering of the battle forces of the Imperial Palace needed Gyue to manage. Secondly, he was only going to refine the demon sword. If he brought so many people, wouldn't it be a joke to the Myriad Sword Alliance? They only invited Situ Muyang and Duguyuma. In front of the Arch K Lake, Situ Muyang was excited to finally be able to return to the Sword Alliance. He pulled Su Yi and chatted happily. Behind him, Jun Haotian and Duguyuma stood quietly with infinite depth in their eyes. Soon after, everyone headed in the direction of the Myriad Sword Alliance. From the Dragon Armor Geomancy map, Su Yi knew that the Myriad Sword Alliance was in the valley east of the Immortal Sword Continent. The terrain of the Cloud region was quite high and the journey to the Myriad Sword Alliance was quite long. After a few days of teleportation, Su Yi and the others finally arrived at the Immortal Sword Continent. As soon as they set foot on the ground, Su Yi and the others didn't enter the nearby cities. Instead, they went straight to the valley in the east. passing through forest after forest and mountain after mountain. The speed of Su-yi and the others could be said to have reached an extreme. Everyone who was walking close to the ground instantly stopped when they felt a trace of vitality aura. "What's wrong?" Situ Muyang looked solemn and asked softly. Su-yi looked around vigilantly and his eyes instantly became gloomy. He said softly, "Someone's here. Their aura is hidden very well. It should be a powerhouse." Suddenly, everyone, including the powerhouses, became nervous. Su-yi, who suddenly opened his eyes, stretched out his right hand and a fierce flame pillar grabbed at the forest. Chapter 2368. Boom! The fiery dragon was as bright as day. The ferocious energy wave was like a tentacle that extended toward the hidden aura. At the same time, Su-yi's feet were covered in light as he turned into a ball of dazzling brilliance and dashed out. "Who's there?" Situ Muyang shouted from behind. Everyone's eyes were filled with shock. The valley was the only way to enter the Myriad Sword Alliance, but they had not noticed anything unusual along the way. Could there be someone so stupid as to lie in ambush here? In the blink of an eye, everyone channeled their primal chi and followed after him. Whoosh! When everyone caught up, they did not hear any sonic booms. In fact, the fiery wave had already been extinguished. The scorching light wrapped around Su-yi's fist as he pushed out his right arm and aimed at the person who was hiding behind them. Immediately, all eyes were fixed on the newcomer. The newcomer was wearing a dark green dress that outlined her graceful figure. She had specially chosen the color of her dress to match the valley. It seemed like she had deliberately followed them. However, when they looked up, the veil covering her face had already been burned, revealing her beautiful side profile that made everyone hold their breaths. The newcomer was as beautiful as peaches and plums. She had a beautiful face and a pair of lovely limpid eyes. Everyone was mesmerized by her beauty. Sister Ruashi. Situ Muyang was shocked to recognize Lu Ruashi. Everyone's eyes narrowed and their expressions relaxed. However, they were still nervous. "What are you doing here?" Su-yi had already withdrawn his right fist, and the huge pressure around them seemed to have evaporated. Lu Ruashi's tense body instantly went limp when the majestic aura dissipated. Wiping the fine beads of sweat on her forehead, Lu Ruashi's expression changed as she pouted and asked, "Why can't I come? Didn't I tell you that I'll be back soon? If I didn't stop you just now, wouldn't you have been injured? You weren't like this in the past." Su-yi grumbled. Su-yi reprimanded Lu Ruashi on the surface when he saw that she had specially come for him. However, he was still happy in his heart. However, Lu Ruashi's stubbornness this time made Su-yi feel even more threatened. In order to ease the tension, Lu Ruashi walked over to Su-yi with a smile and said, "If you marry a chicken, follow the chicken. If you marry a dog, follow the dog. Isn't it because I've been with you for too long?" "You!" Su-yi's tiger-like eyes were blazing with anger, but when he saw Lu Ruashi's beautiful face, the anger in his heart dissipated. Following that, Su-yi heavily knocked Lu Ruashi's forehead as a form of punishment. Then, he asked, "Did I hurt you just now?" Lu Ruashi obediently shook her head, but her pale complexion revealed that Su-yi's move just now had given her quite a shock. Since she had been discovered, Lu Ruashi had no choice but to confess that she had been following them all the way from the teleportation station. The reason why she was able to conceal her aura so well was thanks to the elixirs from the Imperial Palace. If it weren't for the fact that the valley was too small, she wouldn't have been discovered. Situ Muyang and Duguyuma watched as the two of them rubbed each other's ears, and their tension eased quite a bit. Duguyuma smiled faintly and walked over. "This must be Miss Ruashi. That was too dangerous." Duguyuma's blue eyes flickered as he couldn't help but look at Su-yi's wife. Lu Ruashi loosened her arms and nodded at Duguyuma. "I'm really worried about Su-yi. Sorry for the trouble." Su-yi helplessly shook his head when he heard that. The corner of his mouth twitched as he looked at everyone. Since Ruashi has followed us all the way here, what do you all think we should do? Follow us to the Myriad Sword Alliance, of course. Situ Muyang revealed his signature innocent smile as he walked to Lu Ruashi's side and immediately introduced himself enthusiastically. Su Yi had been busy with the Imperial Palace's affairs for the past few days, so he didn't have the time to introduce Qianxue and Ruashi to Situ Muyang. Situ Muyang was the son of the Xinjian Gates sect master. Lu Ruashi had heard about him from Su Yi, so they quickly became familiar with each other. What do you think, Miss Yuma? Su Yi smiled bitterly as he glanced at Duguyuma helplessly. Duguyuma immediately nodded with a smile. He held Lu Ruashi's hand and whispered, "The Myriad Sword Alliance needs Ruashi as a distinguished guest. The Sword Master must be very happy to have both of you here." Su Yi could only nod in agreement. However, he requested that Lu Ruashi stay by his side and not do anything else. After the commotion, everyone continued on their journey. The Myriad Sword Alliance was right in front of them. After confirming their direction, the primordial chi under their feet surged as they headed toward the spatial entrance where the Myriad Sword Alliance was located. Before they left, Su Yi's abyss-like eyes quickly noticed that the Myriad Sword Alliance's experts seemed to be in high spirits because of Lu Ruashi's arrival. His heart sank immediately. "After we enter, you must protect Ruashi. Don't worry about me." He used a unique method of communication to send a message to Tunton. Tunton, who was in his arms, opened its black eyes. From the perspective of others, it was just an ordinary little black stone. It nodded solemnly and said softly, "Yes, master." After half a day, they passed through the valley and stopped in front of a towering mountain. 3 to 4 Myriad Sword Alliance's experts, Duguyuma and Situ Muyang, drew their long swords and placed them in front of their chests. Suddenly, several sword chi waves appeared in front of them. The light was as bright as the sun. Myriad Sword Technique, Mountain Cleaving. Suddenly, several sword waves formed a huge pentagonal shape in the air. The phantom image spread out and hit the mountain like a storm. Boom! The sword chi was sharp and the terrifying energy swept out. The middle of the mountain began to deform. Under the astonished gazes of Su Yi and Lu Ruashi, mysterious ripples of sword chi appeared around the mountain. Behind the dazzling light, a pitch-black spatial crack suddenly formed. "They're hiding in the mountain." Su Yi's eyes narrowed. The 5 great families had their own divine powers, but the Myriad Sword Alliance was hiding in the mountain. Su Yi's eyes lit up as he looked at the huge mountain in front of him. He knew that the mountain alone was a treasure of heaven and earth. "Let's go." The Sword Master must have been waiting for a long time. Duguyuma turned around and smiled faintly. He invited Su Yi and Lu Ruashi and walked toward Lu Ruashi. "Su Yi, I'll protect Miss Ruashi. This is the last time I'll do anything for the Myriad Sword Alliance. Trust me." Duguyuma said to Su Yi with his Yuan Qi, "Su Yi, I'll protect Miss Ruashi. This is the last time I'll do anything for the Myriad Sword Alliance." Duguyuma then held Lu Ruashi's hand and turned into a silver light as they rushed into the mountain. Duguyuma could tell that Su Yi was worried, so he found an opportunity to say those words. Su Yi's heart was filled with doubts as to what the Myriad Sword Alliance was up to. The corner of Su Yi's mouth twitched slightly. His face was as cold as steel as he quickly rushed into the mountain. Chapter 2369. Sword shadows shuttled in front of them. Unlike the spatial cracks that they had passed through before, there were countless sword-intent remnants left behind by the Sword Alliance's ancestors. In the midst of the storm, Su Yi's dark and deep eyes continuously filtered the figure in front of him that was like a sword move. Soon, Su Yi and the others arrived on a flat ground. Su Yi's eyes flickered. As he surveyed his surroundings, a dense and desolate sword chi rushed towards him. Looking forward, He saw a long spiral staircase extending from the flat ground where Su-yi landed all the way to the depths of the sky. "This is the Sky Sword Road." Duguyama smiled. At that moment, the Myriad Sword Alliance's experts had already reported to the Sword Alliance. Duguyama and Situ Muyang then accompanied Su-yi and Lu Ruashi to the Sky Sword Road to enter the Myriad Sword Alliance. The sky in front of him was deep and dark, with a hint of bloody red. The surrounding dark ground gave off an obscure aura. In such an oppressive atmosphere, one's soul could not help but become restless. Su-yi's eyes flashed with shock, but his heart was strangely excited. The smell of rust and blood entered Su-yi's nose. Immediately after, Su-yi looked at the Sky Sword Road and saw bottomless valleys on both sides. "There are countless weapons in here and most of them are swords," Duguyama patiently explained as if he could see through Su-yi's thoughts. Lu Ruashi could not help but gasp in amazement. She said softly, "The Sky Barbarian Sword Sect is indeed powerful. Ordinary people can't withstand the golden inscription chi." Duguyama nodded with a smile and handed a small Sword Alliance token to Lu Ruashi. He said softly, "Ruashi, wear this. The sword chi on the Sky Sword Road won't hurt you." Lu Ruashi's cultivation was the lowest among them. She was only at the second-level Origin Emperor stage. Naturally, she gladly accepted the token. "Junior Martial Uncle, the path of heavenly swords is for those who want to challenge the Myriad Sword Alliance. You're an honored guest, so please use my token. You don't have to leave anymore." Situ Muyang was about to hand over his token to Su-yi. How could Su-yi miss such a good opportunity to comprehend the sword essence? He immediately raised his hand and said softly, "So what if I pass? Normally, those who come to challenge the Sword Mountain are here to practice the sword intent or to learn the sword intent. If you pass, it means that you have the sword intent in your heart. Naturally, you have the potential." Situ Muyang replied. "What was your reaction when you ascended the heavenly sword path?" Su-yi's eyes shone as he looked at Situ Muyang. Situ Muyang scratched the back of his head and said with a smile, "Back then, Grandpa saw that I was still young and brought me here. However, the path of heavenly swords still had a reaction. 3 heavenly swords slashed at me and I was quite frightened." 3 heavenly swords. Su-yi's gaze was fixated on the path of heavenly swords that led to the sky. According to Situ Muyang's introduction, ordinary people would only experience the attacks of the Sword Edge and Sword Wave in the Heavenly Sword Valley when they boarded the Heavenly Sword Road. If they could survive and successfully reach the Sword Alliance, they would be considered as people with sword intent in their hearts. If they could obtain the favor of the Sword Alliance's Heavenly Tao and attract the attacks of the Heavenly Swords, they would be able to communicate with the Sword Spirit. They would be able to comprehend the mysteries within and their body and mind would be like a sword. If one attracted a heavenly sword, the Sword Spirit would protect them. If 2 heavenly swords were attracted, the Sword Spirit would be vast and evil would be cleansed. If 3 heavenly swords were attracted, the heavenly swords and the grand Tao of mountains and rivers would all belong to them. There were only a handful of people in the Myriad Sword Alliance who could attract 3 heavenly swords. When Situ Muyang was brought back to the Myriad Sword Alliance by his grandfather for the first time, he attracted 3 heavenly swords to descend on the path of heavenly swords. The young Situ Muyang quickly became the most promising martial artist in the Myriad Sword Alliance. The Xinjiang Gate naturally followed suit and took advantage of the momentum to soar. "Is there a 4th and 5th heavenly swords?" Su-yi's lips curved slightly. Duguyama and Situ Muyang were surprised. Su-yi's thoughts were indeed different from ordinary people. Duguyama nodded and said in a serious tone, "Of course there is. In the path of Sword Tao, Tao begets 1, 1 begets 2, 2 begets 3, and 3 begets all things. Man follows earth, earth follows heaven, heaven follows Tao, and Tao follows nature. To be able to obtain the number of 3, one would naturally communicate with the sword Tao and have a great opportunity with the sword. However, no one has ever seen 6 or more heavenly swords. Back then, the ancestor of the Myriad Sword Alliance, the imbecile sword Venerable, was the strongest. He obtained the protection of the 6 heavenly swords and was the strongest person in sword Tao since ancient times. Young martial uncle, do you want to? Situ Muyang's starry eyes flickered with astonishment, but he also unconsciously flashed with excitement. If I don't even have 3 heavenly swords, how can I cultivate sword essence? Su Yi's eyes were as deep and cold as an eagle's as he stared at the Myriad Sword Alliance on the path of heavenly swords. At the same time, a group of experts on the Myriad Sword Alliance had fierce gazes. A gigantic sword mountain stood behind them like a huge, sharp weapon that could split the void and pierce the clouds. Under the sword mountain, Duguqing, Duguhen, and other experts were looking at Su Yi through the layers of clouds. Did you say that Lu Ruoshi is also here? Duguqing squinted his eyes and his silver-white robe fluttered in the wind. Duguqing stood at the front. His sword-like eyebrows moved slightly, and he exuded a heroic aura. His aura was thick and mysterious, and his resolute gaze carried an incomparable sharpness. He softly asked the expert who was traveling with Su Yi. Yes, Sword Master, Lu Ruoshi is here of her own accord. Duguqing's lips curled up slightly. He looked at a magnificent pavilion in the distance and said in a low voice, There's a path to heaven, but you don't want to take it. There's no door to hell, but you want to take it. Not only can I capture Su Yi, but I also have the 7-colored exquisite egg. Killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Duguqing turned his head and looked at Elder Duguqing, who had a face like an osprey, and asked in a low voice, Is everything in the Sword Mountain ready? Duguqing's eyes flickered, but his face was still pale. He said in a low voice, According to your instructions, everything is ready. Good. Sky Sea City, the Thunderfire Temple, and the Yun family should also be on their way. Duguqing crossed his arms. Duguhen nodded heavily. A trace of doubt flashed in the corner of his eyes. He then said, The Yun family and the Thunderfire Temple are standing on Su Yi's side. The Yun family is indeed so, but the Thunderfire Temple is not necessarily so. If they knew that Su Yi had stolen something, the Thunderfire Temple would want to kill Su Yi more than anyone else. Duguqing laughed loudly. Everyone followed Duguqing's gaze and looked down. Rays of bone-chilling light flashed out. Rays of sword light swept through the sky, and the gloomy and cold energy wind caused everyone's eyelids to twitch. This was a storm that was destined to shake the heavens and earth. Sword Master, can I really recover my strength after this matter is over? Duguhen's eyes flickered with coldness, but his eyes were fixed on Situ Muyang at the entrance. Duguqing slightly raised the corner of his eyes. His eyes were as deep as a poisonous snake's, causing people's hearts to tremble. Do I still need to say more about their strength? It's just that your little grandson will have to suffer. Chapter 2370. Duguqing's words quickly attracted the attention of all the experts present. Following his gaze, they could see that Duguhen's eyes were flashing with a thought-provoking ruthlessness. Sword Master, you're exaggerating. I'm just following your footsteps. Even if you're my grandson, you can't deviate from the direction of the Myriad Sword Alliance. Duguhen said coldly. His dry and wrinkled skin trembled slightly, and a murderous intent suddenly condensed. Perhaps Duguhen's answer made Duguqing very satisfied. Duguqing nodded heavily. His gaze was like a cold sword shooting into the distance as he said coldly, Does this kid want to walk on the path of heavenly sword? Humph, he's overestimating himself. Does he want to cultivate sword essence too? Someone who's about to die sure likes to jump around. Let's let him have a good time. If he's found to be a cripple, then we'll have a good time. The experts behind him mocked and ridiculed Su Yi for wanting to climb the path of heavenly sword. They all snorted and disapproved. Duguqing bent down and placed his hands on his knees. He carefully watched the changes below. Immediately, his gaze inadvertently glanced at the high pavilion. His mouth moved slightly as if he had something to say. At this moment, at the entrance, Situ Muyang, Duguyuma, and Lu Ruashi stood on both sides of the path of heavenly sword. They nervously looked at Su Yi, who was about to climb the path of heavenly sword. Concentrate on your spirit and qi. Calm your mind. Don't have any distracting thoughts. Rush to the peak with one heart and attract the heavenly sword, Duguyumo reminded behind him. Su Yi's eyes flickered as he looked at the endless path of heavenly sword in front of him. The spiraling path was like a giant hand touching the clouds, lifting the entire myriad sword alliance. Su Yi's heart suddenly surged with lofty aspirations. His blood was gushing. How many heavenly swords could he attract? Could the myriad sword alliance really help him comprehend the heavenly wind sword essence? Thinking of the heavenly wind sword essence that he had been unable to comprehend, Su Yi's heart moved. Looking up, behind the milky white clouds, there seemed to be a few extremely powerful and sharp auras standing there. Su Yi's mouth immediately curled up. Looks like someone is waiting to see a good show. Since that's the case, I'll open your eyes. Instantly, Su Yi smiled behind him. Flames flew under his feet and his body slid out a few feet. When he looked again, he had already landed on the path of heaven's sword. It's about to begin. Young martial granduncle, you can do it! Situ Muyang shouted loudly and licked his hot lip. Lu Ruashi and Duguyuma stood beside Situ Muyang. Their eyes flickered and their pores contracted. They clenched their fists and gulped. That brat is starting. On the peak, Duguhen's cold words slowly fell. His eyes were as cold as an ice cave as he stared intently below. Are you a dragon or a worm? This will determine how you die with dignity. Duguqing smirked and an extremely terrifying aura swept through the world. His eyes also became sharp. As soon as he stepped on the path of heaven's sword, Su Yi felt the ground tremble that he had never felt before. The vibration transmitted from the soles of the feet was like a huge force that directly crushed the soul of a martial artist. The heavenly origin demon's soul instantly reacted and shone like a blazing sun. Su Yi's eyes instantly calmed down. Phew! Su Yi twisted his neck and felt a chill in his throat. Clang! The edge of the sword was piercingly cold, and the sound of the sword was incessant. Su Yi let out a long sigh of relief. He raised his eyes and looked around at the sword aura that could be seen with the naked eye. The harsh sound of the sword aura resounded in the air like the mournful cries of ghosts. Su Yi immediately tensed up. At this time and place, the path of heaven's sword that the Sword Union had used for 10,000 years was definitely not ordinary. Suddenly, Su Yi's eyes focused and a mysterious hand seal condensed in front of him. The Origin Supreme technique suddenly spread out in the sky. A fierce and tyrannical wind immediately rushed out from his body and repelled the sword aura. Whoosh whoosh! The billowing cold sword wave continued to fluctuate, and Su Yi could feel a faint throbbing pain on his skin. The sword aura here is actually so powerful. It's dangerous. Su Yi's voice was a little surprised and he became nervous again. The heavenly wind sword intent in his heart suddenly jumped out and a bolt of lightning flashed through his mind as he strode forward. Come on, Su Yi said indifferently. He raised his head slightly and a purple-gold stream of light swept out from between his eyebrows. Immediately, the monstrous energy covered the sky and covered the earth again. Facing the sword aura storm that swept through the void, Su Yi's unyielding fighting spirit burned fiercely. What a fast speed! In the distance, Situ Muyang was surprised. Su Yi's speed far exceeded everyone who came to challenge before. And Situ Muyang knew that if he did not stand on it, he would not be able to understand how terrifying the destructive aura that swept from the sky was. Under everyone's nervous gaze, Su-yi quickly reached the middle of the path of Heaven's sword. How many heavenly swords can you attract? Although Dugucheng was surprised by Su-yi's ghost-like speed, it was also within his expectations. To be able to survive the explosion of the heavenly wind ranking, his physical strength was naturally much stronger than others. However, when the path of Heaven's sword was interrupted, the test of sword intent really came. Stepping on the path of Heaven's sword, Su-yi's eyes moved slightly. Facing the more violent sword aura, Su-yi had also pushed his physical strength to the maximum. Hearing the crushing sound of friction, Su-yi gradually closed his eyes. Light surged and his body was wrapped in a blazing red light. Immediately, 3 phantoms swept out from Su-yi's body at the same time. What is he doing? How can he split into 3 identical phantoms? Dugerhen's eyes flickered as he looked at the 3 phantoms of Su-yi. They were almost no different from the real body. His eyes suddenly burned with passion. At this time, he still wants to disperse his soul energy? You're so stupid. I don't believe that you can surpass 3 heavenly swords. What on earth is he up to? The experts were puzzled, but as if they were watching a good show, they squinted their eyes and watched seriously as Su-yi made a fool of himself. Among everyone present, only Duguyuma, who had the blue crystal double moon eyes, saw the clue and was shocked. With the talent of the white dragon god, the 3 phantoms of Su-yi were connected to the real body and were exactly the same as the real body. Duguyuma immediately understood that the 3 phantoms were not ordinary phantoms. They were real soul doppelgangers, independent soul energy and independent spiritual consciousness, but they were controlled by the real body. After combining into one, although there could only be one soul, the harvest and feeling obtained were 4 times more than usual. There was also a disadvantage, which was that the damage to the soul was also doubled. Chapter 2371. Su-yi, what exactly do you want to do? Duguyuma's eyes flashed with worry as he looked at Lu Ruoshi beside him. Lu Ruoshi's face was also burning with anxiety. Comprehend the general principle of heavenly wind sword intent. Let's begin. Su-yi's eyes flickered as he muttered in his heart. Using the doppelgangers to accept the test of the path of heavenly sword was also something that Su-yi thought of on the spur of the moment. Standing in this desperate situation, the piercing pain in his soul also made Su-yi a little clear-headed. Sword intent, Su-yi definitely had it. It was just a matter of whether it was strong or weak. The soul energy of the 4 doppelgangers was completely the same. No matter how the test, the number of heavenly sword would not change. However, this way, under such an extreme sword intent environment, the 4 doppelgangers comprehending the general principle of heavenly wind sword intent would directly multiply the heavenly wind sword intent by 4 times. At the same time, the biggest drawback was that if the soul energy received damage, it would also be 4 times more. Su-yi's heart was only thinking of heavenly wind sword intent. Even if it was an experiment, Su-yi would still give it a try. Against the Long family or the evil Dugucheng in front of him, with the protection of heavenly wind sword intent, Su-yi would have more confidence. Chi-la. The 4 doppelgangers stood side by side and spread out their arms. 3 layers of protection spread out at the same time. The demon god battle armor was suffused with purple light, the diamond body was astonishing, and the Yuanyang sky dragon bone dragon was awe-inspiring. No matter how the wind and waves swept over, Su-yi was still unmoving like a vast courtyard, welcoming the onslaught of the sword waves and wind waves. Very quickly, hundreds of sword edges pierced through the sky, mixed with an extremely sharp and terrifying aura, and suddenly collided with Su-yi's impenetrable body. Boom! The energy of heaven and earth suddenly surged, and waves of soul energy spread out. A mysterious light surrounded Su Yi's body and directly rippled. At this moment, Su Yi's expression changed from relaxed to emotional. After a moment, he had already endured the pain of the flesh. The sharp cutting air collided with Su Yi's red skin. The four doppelgangers shouted at the same time, and the energy around him flourished again. Chi La. Immediately the world shook. Situ Muyang, Duguyuma, and the others were shocked. Above the sky there was a terrifying fluctuation. Su Yi can't hold on anymore? Lu Ruashi couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat for Su Yi as she looked at Su Yi on the path of heavenly swords. Everyone from the Sword Alliance saw that Su Yi's four bodies were trembling violently. It was obvious that he was suffering from a huge soul attack as a terrifying soul fluctuation swept through the air like a storm. You want to take the test of the path of the heavenly sword just like that? I'm afraid he's here to die. That saves us the trouble of fighting. The heavens are really helping me. Su Yi, this brat, is nothing compared to what the rumors say. At this moment, Dugu Qing frowned slightly, and the sharp corners of his mouth sank a little more. Looking at the ancient and desolate aura on the path of heavenly swords, his expression changed. Elder Hen, can you see through this kid's method? Dugu Qing asked faintly. At this moment, Dugu Hen's gaze was fixed on Dugu Qing, and there was an extremely envious flame burning in the depths of his eyes. He immediately said, "His soul energy is divided into 4 parts. Although I don't quite understand what he means, the heavenly swords are coming if he can survive this soul test. This kid is too bold. Even if he passes the test, we can't let him live." Dugu Qing nodded and narrowed his eyes. The space below had already collapsed inch by inch, and the intense soul energy was irresistible. "If you're a worm, I'll let you die quickly. If you're a dragon, I'll let you die even faster." The low laughter was like a ghost's roar, and the eyes of the entire myriad Sword Alliance turned extremely cold. Su Yi stood on the path of heavenly swords. The heavenly origin monster soul was unusually bright, and the power released had reached a terrifying level. As he narrowed his eyes, there were more and more sword waves in the light. It wasn't difficult for Su Yi to notice that every sword wave was like a martial artist's soul shadow. Or whip, or carry, or lift, or block, or strike, or stab, or point, or collapse, or stir, or press, or chop, or cut, or wash. More than a dozen light shadows jumped and flipped, flashing and moving. They would gradually glow and heat up in front of Dugu Qing. At the next step, the dozen light shadows would turn into more than 20 light shadows, and then hundreds of light shadows. As Su Yi shuttled back and forth at high speed, it was as if he had read all the profound mysteries of the world's martial arts. Su Yi's pupils kept moving up and down. He had already put aside the pain of flesh and blood, and it could be said that he had forgotten about it. The heavenly origin monster soul shone brightly like a blazing sun, devouring the endless fluctuations of the sword waves. Su Yi was like a sponge, absorbing the endless changes in the sword waves. To outsiders, Su Yi seemed to be still, but in fact, Su Yi had already integrated the 4 soul energies into the sword waves. Something is wrong. Why is Junior Martial Uncle not moving? Situ Muyang, who was worried about Su Yi, frowned. He was the first to feel the violent fluctuations of Su Yi's soul. Why was there no movement at this time? Duguyuma and Lu Ruashi stared at the sky. Duguyuma murmured, "Su Yi's soul energy has become gentle, like the ocean. I think I know why Su Yi has the confidence to do such a shocking thing, because of the soul energy of the beginning of the 6th grade." Lu Ruashi pursed her red lips and looked into the distance. Suddenly, she felt a terrifying fluctuation of heaven and earth energy. "What a powerful soul fluctuation!" Lu Ruashi murmured. Suddenly, the sky became bleak and the heaven and earth energy dissipated quietly. Countless sword waves rushed into the sky like lightning, as if they had been summoned by someone. Swoosh! Swoosh! The people from both the upper and lower sects could feel the terrifying flow of heaven and earth energy. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the terrifying black hole in the sky. It's the heavenly sword. The heavenly sword is coming. Everyone in the Myriad Sword Alliance was on tenterhooks. The terrifying soul energy had caused the expressions of those who had looked down on them to change as they stared at the rapid changes in the sky. When they looked down, they saw 4 people in green robes standing in the sky. Their green robes fluttered in the wind, and a domineering aura filled the sky. Come. The heavenly sword is mine. Without any delay, Su-yi, whose soul and flesh had reached the peak state, shouted and thrust out his palms, pointing directly at the sky. Boom! Heaven and earth trembled. The 6 heavenly silver swords in the sky were huge. They were thousands of meters long and pierced through heaven and earth, hanging in the sky. Along with the earth-shattering momentum, 6 huge long swords covered in mysterious silver talismans, 1 on the left, 1 on the right, 3 on the west, and 3 on the east, all flew towards the heavenly sword road where Su-yi was at. 6 swords. There are 6 heavenly swords. At this moment, Dugu-ching, Dugu-hen, the Myriad Sword Alliance's experts, Dugu-yuma, Situ-muyang, and Lu-ruashi were shocked. Chapter 2372. The domineering aura of heaven and earth was as though 2 sword Tao overlords had descended upon the world, causing the world to tremble. Chi. Chi. When the domineering aura of sword Tao hit Su-yi, it set off a hurricane that knocked out countless treasured swords from the sky sword valley. Clang. Within the hurricane, iron weapons were swirling. Countless divine swords emitted an ancient and desolate aura and shot out rays of light, attaching themselves to the 6 celestial swords. In an instant, heaven and earth lit up as the dazzling radiance of the weapons merged with the dazzling silver light of the celestial swords. The terrifying energy began to impact heaven and earth, enough to destroy heaven and earth into nothingness. Divine swords returned to origin. The powerful energy rushed up to the sky, and even the people from the Myriad Sword Alliance were forced to take a step back. Many of the Myriad Sword Alliance's members felt their eyelids twitch in shock when they saw such a terrifying scene. It was rumored that only the founding Grandmaster, the infatuated Sword Venerable, had caused such an anomaly in heaven and earth. The 6 celestial swords shocked the world and were invincible at that time. Now that the 6 celestial swords had reappeared, and there was even the phenomenon of the divine swords return to origin, how terrifying must one's soul energy and sword Tao will be to trigger such an anomaly. Junior Uncle Master, well done. The 3 of them had retreated a few thousand meters when the celestial swords descended. They looked at Su-yi with admiration and pride in their eyes. Lu-ruashi's body tensed up when she saw the swift movement of the celestial swords and the impact on Su-yi's body. The 6 celestial swords were enough to prove that Su-yi's understanding of sword Tao was extraordinary. According to Dugu-yuma, as long as Su-yi could withstand the pressure of the 6 celestial swords, Su-yi's understanding of sword Tao would be great in the future. Su-yi clenched his fists tightly, closed his eyes, and raised his head to the sky. Vast battle intent gathered around him. Before the 6 celestial swords arrived, Su-yi had already comprehended the general principles of the heavenly wind sword Tao from the countless sword wave. At this moment, the dense sword Tao aura increased the pressure on Su-yi's soul. Under the heavy pressure, Su-yi's body began to tremble. At this moment, Su-yi knew that he could not continue to comprehend the sword Tao. Return! He shouted in his heart. He waved his hand and the 3 celestial swords. Immediately, a ferocious energy was released once again. The terrifying soul energy was unleashed with all its might to resist this ferocious 6 heavens sword. I don't think he can go through it. After recovering from their shock, the members of the Tao Alliance all sucked in cold breaths of air. Enduring the 3 heavens sword was already the limit of what a human body could endure. Although the 6 celestial swords, it was difficult if he could survive the celestial swords. Being a genius, a peerless genius, wasn't that easy. What? At this moment, Dugucheng's face was completely pale. Su Yi's 6 heavens sword had slapped everyone in the Myriad Sword Alliance in the face. At this moment, Dugucheng hoped that Su Yi would die under the pressure of the 6 heavens sword. Do you think you can die? Duguhen's envy and jealousy towards Su Yi was already on the surface. Seeing that Su Yi had achieved something that even he could not, his withered hands clenched tightly, and a cold, murderous intent rushed out. At this moment, Duan Hen opened the communication jade in his interspatial bag. Situ Muyang's pleading voice could be heard. Grandpa, Junior Martial Uncle has proven himself. Didn't the Sword Alliance invite him here? Let's help them block it. Duan Hen looked at Duan Cheng and gritted his teeth. He threw the communication jade on the ground and a crisp explosion was heard. Boom! The 6 celestial swords finally gathered in the air. They overlapped like mountains and buried Su Yi under the terrifying mountain of swords. Su Yi! Lu Ruashi almost blacked out when she saw this. Duguyusheng stopped her. No, the communication jade is useless because of the heavenly might. I have to save Junior Martial Uncle. Situ Muyang said solemnly. Duguyusheng pulled the trembling Lu Ruashi and shouted, Don't go! You won't be able to do anything even if you go now. Nobody can stop the 6 celestial swords. Situ Muyang stood where he was and clenched his fist. He wanted to believe in Su Yi. However, everyone in the Myriad Sword Alliance knew about the power of the heavenly swords. Moreover, there were 6 of them. Looking at the destructive aura of the sword mountain surging through the heavens and earth, and the silver light leaking out, Situ Muyang's heart trembled. The entire heavenly sword road was forcibly blocked in the middle, and the 3 of them stood together. Wait, I'll wait for a while more. If there's no response, I'll save Junior Martial Uncle even if I have to die. Situ Muyang's face turned gloomy. Chi. The earth-shattering golden spear Chi was incomparably sharp, piercing through space. Everywhere in the void was incomparably violent and crazy sword wave. No one knew what would happen to Su Yi in such a situation. I thought only the extraterritorial region had such terrifying pressure. The Tiannan continent isn't that weak. Su Yi felt like he was carrying a mountain. His body fell vertically and penetrated the hard black ground. His legs were embedded in it. Rumble! Su Yi's green robe was surrounded by a demonic glow. He activated the Origin Region space with the Origin Supreme technique and the art of heavenly control at the same time. Su Yi's pale face was filled with pride. He had endured this level of pressure in the space-time storm, and it was much more terrifying than this. Fortunately, he had made a huge breakthrough in his soul cultivation before he came. Otherwise, his soul would have disintegrated even if his body could withstand it. In the sealed space, Su Yi looked up at the giant sword that was glowing with silver light. Suddenly, the sound from the outside world disappeared. Su Yi's eyes flickered. He knew clearly that the test was divided into 3 parts. At the beginning, the sword waves were just a small matter. It tested whether you had the potential for sword intent. After the sky sword arrived, your body could withstand it. It was the test of soul energy. This was the greatest benefit for your sword intent and soul energy. As long as you could withstand this, the pressure of the 6 heavens sword would naturally disappear and the test would end. Everything was just a matter of time. He adjusted his body and soul energy to the best and waited quietly. Su Yi, who was a little bored, maintained this posture. He once again mobilized the sky wind sword essence that the 4 phantoms had comprehended, and slowly flipped through it. I seem to have made some progress. I just need a quiet environment to comprehend it properly. Su Yi muttered softly. Su Yi, with a joyful expression, activated his soul energy. The Heaven Origin Demon Soul shone brightly, and an extremely sharp aura spread across the Six Heavens sword. It made one's heart tremble. If the Six Heavens sword was a living creature, it might have been angered to death. Anyone would have to use all their strength to withstand the pressure of the Six Heavens sword. However, Sui was able to remain calm inside. How many people from the Myriad Sword Alliance were angry? Chapter 2373. Whoosh, whoosh. From the outside, the Six Heavens Sword's aura was slowly fluctuating and spreading across the entire area. Under the gaze of countless people, the ferocious sword aura began to slowly dissipate. Just as the Sword Alliance's experts widened their eyes and looked at Sui fervently, everyone wanted to see him die. At that moment, a thunderclap exploded in the sky. Boom, boom. Between heaven and earth, an even more ferocious aura surged as everyone watched the Six Heavens Sword Mountain loosen its grip. Sui stood in his green robe with a lofty look in his eyes. The Six Heavens Sword was like a spiritual object that revolved around Sui. The sword light was dazzling, as if it was respectfully welcoming the mysterious object in the void. "What's that?" Duguhen pointed at the unparalleled energy thundercloud in the sky and shouted loudly. In an instant, everyone looked at the sky and was immediately speechless. At that moment, a large patch of dark clouds rolled in the sky as if a demon had descended. It was as if a god was about to destroy the world. Silver-white light arcs jumped and surged. Such a terrifying aura spread a chill in the hundreds of eyes in the sky for no reason. Junior Marshal Uncle, is there another phenomenon? Situ Muyang squinted his eyes in shock. Under such a terrifying aura that was about to erupt, his thin and weak body could not help but tremble. Ah-ee! Lu Ruashi's eyes widened as she looked at Sui, who had risen into the air. A trace of shock and surprise suddenly surged on her pale face. One had to know that the Six Heavens Sword was already the most powerful talent in the history of the Myriad Sword Alliance. Now, not only did Sui survive easily, but he was also like a mighty and awe-inspiring son of God who was welcoming the final gift from the depths of the sky. Everyone's eyes widened. This was an eternal phenomenon that no one present, including Dugu Cheng and Duguhen, had ever seen before. Whoosh! A large patch of thunderclouds rolled in the sky like a violent storm with golden light shining brightly. The galloping lightning arcs were like shocking roaming dragons that looked down on heaven and earth and thousands of creatures in the world with disdain. It was a magnificent scene. Bang! Suddenly, a murderous and violent lightning beam slashed down. Then, the six heavenly swords shot up into the sky like lightning, and a fierce aura swept out from Sui-Jo's body like a storm. Sui, who was hovering in the air, had a proud look in his eyes. As a faint golden light flashed across his eyes, an incomparably violent aura burst into the sky. Enveloped by the divine light, Sui raised the corner of his mouth and looked at the uncontrollable terrifying aura in the sky. Sui knew that this was the best opportunity to increase his soul energy and comprehend the heavenly wind sword intent. He didn't know whether this trip to the Myriad Sword Alliance was a blessing or a curse, but Sui knew that he had made the right choice by coming to the path of heavenly swords. I can't let this brat create another phenomenon. Dugu Cheng's face was ghastly pale with murderous intent. As soon as he said that, all the experts behind him nodded their heads. This time, they were going to kill Sui, but Sui had shone brightly on the path of heavenly swords. The phenomenon that could destroy heaven and earth was not only a slap to the Myriad Sword Alliance's face, but it was also a great show of strength to the Myriad Sword Alliance. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Suddenly, a deep sonic boom was heard. It was as though there were countless silver lightning bolts exploding in the sky, causing waves of water to shoot up into the sky. Dozens of Myriad Sword Alliance's Supreme Being experts had appeared above Sui. As they looked down, Their terrifying aura surged toward Sui. Its grandfather. What are they doing? Situ Muyang was slightly puzzled. Shortly after, Duguyuma and Lu Ruashi rushed up into the sky. In the sky, Su Yi's lips curled into a smile as he looked at the people surrounding him. Duguqing shouted, "Sect Master Su, stop! 6 heavenly swords is already the limit. Don't make a mistake. Su Yi, 6 heavenly swords is already the strongest in the Taoist alliance in the past 10,000 years. If this continues, we won't be able to save you. Sect Master Su, the Sword Master cherishes talents. He specially asked us to assist you in resisting the heavenly swords. Don't be stubborn." There were all sorts of words of advice, but they were filled with disdain and contempt from the bottom of their hearts. Su-yi looked at the cold gazes of the crowd and turned to Lu Ruashi and the others. Looking at this omnipotent man from afar, Lu Ruashi's heart seemed to have assimilated with a pool of spring water. She smiled sweetly and said, "Ah-ee, do what you want to do. I'll always support you from behind. Junior Marshal Uncle, go. I've said before that you're the man that I admire the most in this life and the next life. 6 heavenly swords are nothing. Natural phenomenon is nothing." Situ Muyang shouted as he waved his fist. His eyes were filled with fighting spirit. "Muyang, how dare you!" Upon hearing Situ Muyang's words, Duguqing jumped up and shouted angrily, "Do you want Sect Master Su to die? Grandpa, I know how powerful Junior Marshal Uncle is." Situ Muyang straightened his neck and glared at his grandpa. Situ Muyang, who had always been obedient, dared to challenge his grandpa in public for Su-yi. Instantly, all the powerhouses from the Myriad Sword Alliance were shocked and they all sneered. "I believe in him too." Amidst the awkward atmosphere, a gentle voice pierced through the sky and suppressed everyone. Everyone noticed that it was Duguyuma who had spoken. "Ha ha!" Seeing that both sides had different attitudes, Sui looked up to the sky and let out a long roar. His voice blasted into the sky and his heart was filled with pride. The flames were dazzling. He bent his legs and his curled body suddenly straightened. Then, he charged into the depths of the sky like a sword that could split the sky. "If people don't believe in me, the heavens don't believe in me. The heavenly Tao exists and there will be a way that I believe in." Under everyone's shocked gaze, Su-yi had already charged into the sky where the undercurrent was surging. At this moment, everyone retreated at lightning speed. In a flash, Duguhen and the other experts had retreated to Duguqing's side. At the entrance, Situ Muyang and Lu Ruashi's skin tightened. They could feel that the pressure in the sky was getting sharper and the terrifying aura was flowing rapidly. The sky was about to change. "It's coming." Situ Muyang was filled with anticipation. He took a deep breath and circulated all his vitality attribute. He held his breath in anticipation. "Let that kid die. I don't believe that he can survive." Duguqing's eyes twitched. He crossed his arms and stared at the changes in the sky. Duguqing became nervous and could not help but look at the pavilion in the distance. In the pavilion, a surging aura suddenly erupted. Duguqing subconsciously trembled and heard someone beside him shouting, "It's coming!" Boom! The flames that streaked across the sky pierced through the dark clouds, and a deafening sonic boom resounded in every corner of the Myriad Sword Alliance. Within tens of thousands of miles, countless lightning bolts struck down. It was dazzling. Visible electric arcs flashed across every inch of land in the space. It was as if the world was going to be destroyed. Bam! At this moment, Su-yi, who was surrounded by 6 swords, looked up to the sky. Within the dark clouds, 3 golden giant swords slashed down from the depths of the void. Chapter 2374. Boom! The 3 golden celestial swords slashed down like a judge. Instantly, the entire sky was filled with golden radiance. The The ferocious and sharp aura caused the void to tremble violently. Golden light shone brightly, and the 6 heavenly swords that were waiting below suddenly rushed into the sky with a swoosh. They were like mountain peaks that spanned across the 3 golden heavenly swords. Whoosh, whoosh. Suddenly, 9 large swords that were as big as a courtyard spun rapidly. Dazzling radiance overflowed. The overbearing and destructive aura instantly split the void into 9 parts. The turbulent spatial ripples had already turned into a boundless and terrifying storm. It was extremely violent, and it hit the countless heavy iron swords like wind chimes. They rustled and rang continuously. Back off! Upon seeing this, Dugucheng and Duguhen shouted angrily. The celestial swords were extremely domineering. In the blink of an eye, countless figures did not even have the time to be surprised. They quickly retreated. When they retreated, they looked up at the terrifying scene in the sky. Their bodies were stiff and their expressions were petrified. The violent sword aura that swept across the sky was like a sword spirit looking down on the common people. This was something that none of the people present had ever seen in their lives. Many of them knew that even the infatuated sword venerable did not have such an achievement. The fierce and destructive aura in the sky was turbulent and continuous. The overbearing aura spread between heaven and earth like a raging sea of fire. It directly tore everyone's limbs, bones, blood vessels, and tendons apart. Oh my God! Sister, look! The heavenly sword road has been lifted. Looking into the distance in disbelief, Situ Muyang, who had retreated thousands of meters again, still felt an unparalleled and terrifying aura. It was as if there was a resonance in his body. His blood was boiling and his aura was surging. At this moment, under everyone's dumbfounded gaze, the entire heavenly sword road that led to the myriad sword alliance in the sky seemed to be summoned by the sword spirit. Layers of black suddenly lifted up abruptly. Between heaven and earth, large pieces of black soil that could be seen with the naked eye floated up into the sky. It added a terrifying black color to the horrifying sword aura in the sky. The black ripples and the black soil caused the entire space to sink into a dark and terrifying darkness. Only the 9 large swords were moving, whistling mightily. Suddenly, the heavenly sword road that had completely lifted up its outer layer emitted a silvery white radiance. An unparalleled road made of 7th-grade primordial stones flashed like a living creature and extended all the way to the 9th heaven sword in the sky. It's 7th-grade primordial stones. There's such a huge mine of 7th-grade primordial stones in the world. For everyone present, this was the first time they had seen the full appearance of the heavenly sword road. Under the dazzling light, there was an extreme aura of destruction. Clang! And Su-Yi was surrounded by mysterious talisman light, with his eyes like a tiger's eyes. And the spiritual energy that was condensed around his body's body had reached its peak. Was Dugucheng done? Had Duan sword road? Sword road sword had sword. Where had sword road? Su-Yi had to die. That was Duguhen's promise to him. Duguhen did not expect that things would develop to this point. He did not expect that Su-Yi's talent would be much higher than his in the past. The envy and jealousy of a genius being crushed made him want to kill. In an instant, the experts who had previously looked down on Su-Yi fell silent. Their eyes were filled with shock. Many of them had even been shaken by the terrifying aura of the sky soared to the point that their faces and ears turned red. It was difficult for them to continue. There's a change in the plan. This kid must die. Dugucheng looked at the heavenly sword wrapped around Su-Yi's body viciously. He glanced at Duguhen behind him. Immediately, the sharp sword chi around Dugucheng's body circulated rapidly as he charged towards the tall building in the distance. So what if he's strong? It's a pity that he's going to die early. Give me all your secrets before you die. After Dugucheng left, Duguhen's eyes flashed coldly. He glanced at Situ Muyang in the distance again and snorted. Then, he looked at the changes in the void. Above the void, the shocking nine heavens sword had merged into one. With Su-yi as the center, the nine heavens sword formation rotated rapidly. A terrifying storm of sword chi erupted in the air, and its domineering power swept through the sky. If they did not see it with their own eyes, no one would believe that there was someone in the world who could comprehend sword will to such an extent. If the path of the heavenly sword only tested the potential of sword intent, then Su-yi's path of sword intent would be unprecedented. Even the founder of the Way of the Sword could not catch up to him. In the middle of the sword formation, Su-yi raised his eyes. He had already mobilized all the strength in his body to withstand the huge pressure that would have killed millions of ordinary people. Enduring the severe pain in his body, the surrounding space exploded one after another. On the circular sword formation wall, the silver light pillars like fireworks gradually began to flow. Suddenly, Su-yi's eyes flickered rapidly. It was as if he saw countless lights and shadows flickering rapidly again. This is, his throat rolled. Looking at the terrifying energy exploding in the sky, Su-yi knew that this was the Heavenly Sword Road's gift to the person who could hold on until the end. Vaguely, Su-yi nodded his head. He struggled to flip through the vast information in his mind. Gradually, he matched the light and shadows in front of him with the Heavenly Wind Sword Will outline. The ultimate of sword will, different paths lead to the same destination. I see. Su-yi, who was overjoyed, condensed his hand seals and immediately turned the sky origin demon soul around. The blazing sun circulated like the wind. At this moment, Su-yi, who was above the void, had once again entered the state of epiphany. His spiritual sense was like a high-speed primordial stone machine, fully absorbing the ultimate profound between heaven and earth. All the people outside could only marvel at this barbaric and terrifying change. They watched as Su-yi stood in the fierce storm, unmoved by the wind and rain. He was as lofty as a mountain. Bang, bang, bang. After a long while, the aura between heaven and earth crazily collided like thunder. The sword chi and electric current were still flickering and various violent energy winds tore through heaven and earth. In the chaotic space, all the experts could no longer bear such a strong pressure and retreated to the depths of the Myriad Sword Alliance. Everyone was dumbfounded as they looked at the terrifying scene. Situ Muyang and Duguyuma had also been taken back to the Myriad Sword Alliance by Duguqing. The three of them stood at a high place and were extremely nervous. Junior Marshal Uncle is too fierce. He's simply too strong. How did he cultivate? Situ Muyang looked at Lu Ruoshi in disbelief. He kept nodding his head and licked his lips bitterly. Lu Ruoshi and Duguyuma's hearts were hanging in their throats. Their eyes narrowed and they were on tenterhooks as they followed the arc of the sword storm. In the end, the energy between heaven and earth seemed to be unable to do anything to Su-yi. Like a tired martial artist, the terrifying aura in the void began to dissipate. Chapter 2375. After the final collision of the electric currents, thousands of meters of valleys and mountains in the Myriad Sword Alliance were directly destroyed. Some of them were even shaved off by more than half. A large area of cracks spread across the ground and extended to the entire mountain range. Bang! After the final explosion, the 9 celestial swords were sheathed in the sky. Tens of thousands of lightning bolts also returned to the depths of the clouds. At that moment, the earth-shattering sound of metal chimes attracted everyone's attention once again. The celestial swords have returned to the valley. Lu Ruoshi exclaimed in shock. Looking over, the countless iron longswords that swept across the sky seemed to have lost their attraction force. They drew an arc in the sky and turned around to fall back into the valley. All of a sudden, everyone present was dumbfounded. The earth-shattering sound of the golden chimes was like a dazzling rain of swords in the air. The continuous sonic booms caused everyone to tremble in fear. Whoosh! Whoosh! Duguyuma's blue eyes rippled as she looked at the sky along with the rain of swords. Su-yi was surrounded by mysterious runes and his green robe was fluttering in the wind. A brazen sword essence surged between heaven and earth. Just looking at him from afar was enough to send chills down one's spine. After a long time, the 10,000 swords disappeared. A large area of soil was directly cut into mud dots and attached to the path of Heavenly Sword. The heavenly path that was made of 7th-grade origin stones dimmed once again. Whoosh! Whoosh! At that moment, Su-yi finally opened his eyes. Heaven and earth returned to normal with only faint ripples in the air. When he looked down, he saw countless people looking at him as if he was a monster. Su-yi curled his lips and raised his eyes. A domineering aura instantly filled Su-yi's eyes. Only Su-yi knew what he had gained from this path of heavenly swords. Just a little bit more. Different paths of swords led to the same destination. Using this as a reference, Su-yi had a basic understanding of the heavenly wind sword essence. Compared to before when he had no idea at all, Su-yi understood at least 70% of it. If Su-yi did not have to enter the Myriad Sword Alliance, Su-yi would really like to find a quiet place to carefully comprehend the heavenly wind sword essence. He had a feeling in his heart that very soon, he would truly completely grasp the heavenly wind sword intent. At that point, Su-yi could be considered to have reached the lowest level of the Sword King divine domain. The cultivation of sword intent was simply too complex. Of course, this 70% Sky Wine sword intent was far more powerful than Suruga's 20 to 30%. It could be said that in terms of sword intent cultivation, Su-yi did not lose to anyone present, and could even crush many people. At this moment, Su-yi really wanted to test how powerful his sword intent was. Looking at the astonished gazes below, Su-yi's green robe fluttered, and a vigorous and domineering aura drifted out. He waved his hands behind him, and his whole body broke through the air. He actually managed to survive. Many experts who were originally not in the welcoming array walked out one after another because of this huge image that connected heaven and earth. Looking at the expert who was pressing down from the sky, a huge pressure that could suppress heaven and earth instantly caused the eyes of everyone present to freeze. Their faces turned pale, and they couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva in disbelief. Su-yi, how many secrets do you have? Dugerhen glanced at the tall building beside him. The tall building was as calm as usual at this moment. Naturally, he knew that Dugucheng was inside discussing with that person how to deal with this situation. Now it was time for him to make the decision. Su-yi. Lu Ruashi watched Su-yi shock the world once again, and her heart was filled with worship for Su-yi. She trotted all the way to Su-yi's embrace and hugged him tightly. Su-yi, who was a little out of breath from being hugged, restrained his aura and tried his best not to hurt Lu Ruashi. He said softly, "What are you doing? Hugging me as soon as you come back. It's not like I'm not coming back." At this moment, Lu Ruashi didn't care who was present. Compared to Ling Qianxue and Duanmu Xiaoman, Lu Ruashi had been completely conquered by Su-yi. Su-yi was the sacred mountain in her heart, her world. I don't care. As long as you're not by my side, I'll be worried. Even though I know you're the strongest. Lu Ruashi stuck out her tongue and buried her face in Su-yi's embrace. Just like that, under everyone's shocked gazes, Su-yi and Lu Ruashi talked and laughed as if there was no one around. "Come, let me touch my heart to see if it's still beating." Su-yi pulled Lu Ruashi into his embrace with a naughty smile. He took the opportunity to shake his sleeve, and a small black shadow quickly reached into Lu Ruashi's collar. Lu Ruashi screamed and jumped away. She said softly, "Shameless! I'm the only one allowed to act shamelessly, but you're not allowed to. Ah. Sui laughed and pulled Lu Ruashi's hand as he walked towards Situmuyang and Duguyuma. After confirming that Tunton was already on Lu Ruashi's body, Sui stared at Situmuyang, who was still in a daze, and laughed. What? Do you think I can't recognize your junior martial uncle just because I'm walking on this path? Situmuyang swallowed hard and jumped back. He looked at Sui, who was full of energy, and gave Sui a thumbs up. Junior martial uncle, I apologize for what I said in the past. You're not the person I admire the most in my next life. You're the person I admire the most forever. Sui smiled bitterly. Situmuyang was still so sincere and exaggerated. After saying that, Situmuyang turned to the experts in high spirits and shouted proudly, Senior martial uncles, this is my junior martial uncle, the king of heaven's pride in the chaos realm. You've all seen it today, right? Look at how strong he is. Those senior and junior brothers who usually call themselves kings can all come and try to see how strong my junior martial uncle is. Immediately, everyone looked at Sui. Their gazes froze and the corners of their mouths turned up in embarrassment. If Situmuyang wasn't Duguhen's grandson, he would have been beaten up already. However, when everyone's gaze shifted to Sui, they recalled the shocking scene of the 9 heavenly swords and sucked in a breath of cold air. Strong, he was really too strong. Sui, these are the supreme being experts of the Myriad Sword Alliance. Duguyuma looked at Sui and said softly, You gave the Myriad Sword Alliance a big show of strength just now. They won't let you go. Sui shrugged. He had only taken one path. Was he really afraid of offending them? At that moment, Duguhen slowly walked out from behind the crowd. He looked at Situmuyang and said indifferently, Mu Yang, the Xinjian Gate's junior martial uncle is here. Have you forgotten that you're a disciple of the Sword Alliance? Upon hearing that, Situmuyang looked at Sui and gestured for him to go over first. He walked to Duguhen's side obediently. Duguhen immediately shouted angrily, Don't boost his morale. Stand at the back. Chapter 2376. Situmuyang made a face and stood with the other experts. Duguhen sized up Sui and the cold light hidden in the depths of his eyes quickly disappeared. He smiled and said, Sui, I've heard a lot about you. Sui nodded. He immediately recognized that this was the ruthless person who had broken up Situ Luyun and Duguing. He was also a top expert in the heaven barbarian world, Duguhen. However, for some reason, Duguhen's strength had declined rapidly in recent years. Sui withdrew the light in his eyes when he felt a ferocious sword intent on him. He retaliated with a fierce aura from his body. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Duguhen's eyelids twitched. He curled his hands and his footsteps slowed. However, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. Even if Duguhen's cultivation had declined, he wouldn't show any fear when compared to Sui, who was in the first stage of the origin domain realm. Duguhen was secretly shocked. His wrinkled face twitched slightly when he heard Sui say, Elder Dugu, I've heard about you from Mu Yang. I've also heard a lot about you. The 9 heavenly swords and the divine swords have returned to their origin. Sect Master Su's arrival has completely overshadowed our Myriad Sword Alliance. I'm afraid even martial ancestor Qijian would feel inferior in front of you. Duguhen walked forward and looked at Lu Ruashi, who was standing beside Sui. His eyes twitched unconsciously and a sense of excitement appeared in the corners of his eyes. I was just lucky. I stumbled on the path of the sword by accident. How can I compare to Senior Duguhen? While being observed, Sui was also observing the changes in Duguhen's expression. The two of them had a spurious smile on their faces. They were praising each other on the surface, but they were secretly scheming against each other. So this is Sui. I heard that he won first place in the Tianfeng ranking tournament. 9 heavenly swords. I'm afraid the Myriad Sword Alliance hasn't had such a terrifying genius in the past 10,000 years. He looks very young. What a monster! I don't know if he's young or not, but this time, the Sword Master clearly invited him to train his demonic sword. Why is he walking the path of the heavenly sword? All the experts who had witnessed all this behind him saw Su Yi's true appearance with their own eyes. He was actually so young, and they couldn't help but feel even more terrified by the descent of the 9 swords just now. The group of experts behind him looked at the experts who were scrambling to come out and said, "All right, each hall's disciples, bring them back. The Sword Master has ordered everyone to gather at the foot of the Sword Mountain tomorrow." With a command, all the powerhouses who were watching the show dispersed one after another. As they left, countless shocked and fiery gazes fell on Su Yi and Lu Ruoxi. However, Su Yi's gaze was as sharp as a sword, as calm as an ancient well. It was as if nothing had happened. In fact, he was the only one who knew that the Heavenly Sword Path was not only a show of strength to the Myriad Sword Alliance, but more importantly, it was also a great boost to his soul energy. On one hand, the comprehension of the Heavenly Wind Sword intent could strengthen the cultivation of soul energy. At the same time, it was also an extreme cultivation of martial Tao. Su Yi's eyes were like torches as he stared at Duguhen. He wanted to see something from Duguhen's eyes. Soon, only Duguhen and the experts who were originally here to welcome Su Yi were left at the entrance of the Myriad Sword Alliance. The scene was tit for tat, and the experts' faces were filled with shock and coldness. Looking at the young expert who had slapped his own face, Su Yi said coldly, "Why don't I see Sword Master Dugu here?" Suddenly, the experts who more or less knew about this matter shifted their gazes. Duguhen said softly, "Sect Master Su, you've caused such a huge commotion. It's a great fortune that our Myriad Sword Alliance has never seen in 10,000 years. Naturally, the Sword Master will deal with the aftermath for you." Upon hearing that, Su Yi nodded slightly. Compared to Situ Muyang, Duguhen was a sincere young man and a cunning old fox. Since Su Yi had obtained some benefits from the Myriad Sword Alliance, he naturally would not be too aggressive. He immediately brought up the important matter that he had to attend to. "Elder Dugu, I'm here to refine the demon sword. I've disturbed the sacred sea of flames before and the demon sword is still intact. May I ask how the Myriad Sword Alliance is going to help me refine the demon sword?" Su Yi asked. Duguhen's eyes flickered slightly. He seemed to be satisfied that Su Yi had brought up this topic. His anger from slapping Su Yi's face instantly dissipated. "Sect Master Su, you've seen endless divine weapons on both sides of the path of heavenly swords. Since ancient times, many sword Tao martial artists have wanted to explore and many have lost their lives here. Therefore, the path of heavenly swords can be considered as the end of the road." After that, Duguhen turned around and looked at the depths of the towering clouds. He squinted his eyes and said, "The Myriad Sword Mountain is even more so. It's the place where countless sword Tao martial artists cultivate their sword Tao. The sharpness of the sword Tao and the profoundness of the sword Tao there have long deterred people. If Sect Master Su can throw the demon sword into the Myriad Sword Mountain, it will be able to completely destroy the weapon's soul and the person's soul." When it came to the Myriad Sword Mountain and the profoundness of the sword Tao, there was absolutely no sect in the Tianan continent that could surpass it. Therefore, when they said those words, all the experts held their heads high, and a trace of absolute arrogance shot out from the depths of their eyes. "The Myriad Sword Mountain." Su Yi muttered and exchanged glances with Situ Muyang. It seemed like the Myriad Sword Mountain was the most dangerous place on this trip. Unconsciously, Lu Ruoxi held Su Yi's arm closer and turned her head. The corner of Su Yi's mouth curled up slightly. His warm smile instantly melted the cold atmosphere. Behind them, Duguyuma pursed his lips and clenched his fists tightly. His fingertips dug into his palms. At this moment, Duguyuma wished that he was beside Su Yi. Looking at the two of them, Duguyuma felt even more lonely. However, when he heard them talking about the Myriad Sword Mountain, his dark blue eyes gradually turned serious. The Myriad Sword Mountain. Duguyuma shuddered. He naturally knew how dangerous the Myriad Sword Mountain was. Countless sages had lost their lives in it. It was a heaven for sword Dao martial artists, and also a graveyard for sword Dao martial artists. The Myriad Sword Mountain had 10,000 floors. It was said that the depths of the Myriad Sword Mountain were directly connected to the Earth's core. One could experience the changes of nature, and time would also lose its meaning. One's martial will would rapidly reach the imminent divinity realm. It was also because of how terrifying it was that no one had ever gone in. Martial uncle, the Myriad Sword Mountain is extremely terrifying. I'm afraid it's not appropriate for Su Yi to go in rashly, right? Duguyuma stepped forward and said. Everyone present felt a chill run down their spine. Dugurhen sneered and looked up at his former senior brother, the disciple of One-Finger Sword God, and said softly, Little niece, if the person who triggered the 9 swords is afraid of the Myriad Sword Alliance, I'm afraid there's no one else in the Myriad Sword Alliance who can refine the demon sword. Chapter 2377. But, Duguyuma shouted anxiously. He knew his martial uncle's temperament very well. Whatever he said must have a hidden meaning. His face immediately turned cold. I believe in the Myriad Sword Alliance's sincerity. Since they invited me here, they must be fully prepared. If something happens to me, they have to at least give an explanation to the Chaos Region and Heavenly Palace. Otherwise, it'll be hard to convince everyone. Su Yi gave Duguyuma a look before he turned around and looked at Dugurhen with a smile. He raised his eyebrows and said, Don't you think so? Elder Dugu. Situ Muyang jumped out and looked at his grandfather solemnly. Grandfather, junior granduncle is a talent. The Sword Alliance will never do something that harms his life, right? In an instant, everyone's attention was on Dugurhen. They all wanted to see how Dugurhen would answer. Dugurhen's eyes gradually turned cold as he glanced at the three of them. Su Yi had played a trick on him with just a few words. If he said that he would never harm Jian Wushuang, his prestige as an elder in the Sword Alliance would be gone if there were any changes in the future. Not everyone present knew what Duguqing and Dugurhen were planning this time, so Dugurhen's words seemed to have become a promise. At this time, his own grandson, Situ Muyang, had also come to interfere. The anger in Dugurhen's heart reached its peak. His pupils gradually shrank, and a cold aura suddenly spread out. The Myriad Sword Alliance will never do such a thing. Sect Master Su, you're exaggerating. A loud voice resounded through the area. Suddenly, a vast and ancient magnetic voice came from the pavilion in the distance. When everyone paid attention to it, a silver-white sword light that cut through space and rippled through the air rushed to the heavens and earth. Everyone's eyes turned cold and lit up. Sword Master! Dugurhen's eyes flickered and his beard trembled. Sword Master! The experts present shouted respectfully as a silver-white robe suddenly appeared. He was heroic and his aura was profound and mysterious. His sword chi was awe-inspiring and his aura was definitely not weaker than Yen Mietian. Looks like this person has been hiding his strength all along during the Heavenly Wind ranking tournament. Su Yi looked at Duguqing with a smile on his face. He secretly operated the Origin Supreme technique, and a vast aura instantly enveloped him and Lu Ruashi. The delicate Lu Ruashi stood among the crowd of experts entering the forest like a swaying lotus flower. Su Yi gently shielded her small body behind him. Her gaze immediately turned cold and she showed no fear. She straightened her face and faced one of the 5 strongest people in the Sky Barbarian continent, Duguqing. Sect Master Su has improved so quickly since we parted ways with Heavenly Wind. All the disciples of the Myriad Sword Alliance are ashamed to face him. Mu Yang, you have to learn more from your junior martial uncle. Duguqing narrowed his eyes and shot a sharp light at Su Yi like a sword. Looking at the seemingly sincere Duguqing, Su Yi's heart sank. With a casual wave of his hand, a boundless primordial chi halo suddenly dissipated Duguqing's sword principle aura. Suddenly, there was a slight change in Duguqing's eyes. Su Yi casually raised his head, and his deep eyes were filled with indifference. He said faintly, "Sword Master Dugu, I've been here on the path of the Heavenly Sword and refining the Demon Sword. I've been here for half a day. This is not how you should treat a guest." After a short pause, Duguqing's face stiffened. He immediately laughed and nodded. "It's my fault. Sect Master Su, please. I've already arranged a place for you to stay." Duguqing immediately signaled with his eyes, and all the experts present retreated to the side and made a path for him. Duguqing led the way in front. "Let's go." Su Yi held Lu Ruashi's hand and slowly followed. When he stepped on the stairs of the Myriad Sword Alliance, he intentionally or unintentionally looked at the tall pavilion where Duguqing had come from. "There's a familiar smell there." Tunten transmitted her voice to Su Yi. Su Yi's heart instantly jumped. He had also sensed the aura, but it was extremely subtle. The person who had come was definitely a top expert, and he had a unique way of hiding his aura. In the distant sky, an almost inaudible sound was transmitted. In the tall pavilion, the faint spatial ripples immediately dissipated. "Master," Tunten immediately reported. Su Yi shook his head and held Lu Ruashi's hand even tighter. Feeling Su Yi's strength, Lu Ruashi raised her head and smiled faintly. At that moment, Su Yi's voice was transmitted to Tunten through his Yuan Qi. "I'll take care of the rest. What you need to do is to protect Ruashi. You don't have to worry about anything else." He had a feeling that the Myriad Sword Alliance was not only targeting him, but also Lu Ruashi. This bad premonition instantly covered Su Yi's heart with a layer of dust. However, Su Yi would not reveal any of this in front of Lu Ruashi. Very soon, under Duguqing's arrangements, the Sword Refining Conference would officially begin the next day. At that time, all the disciples of the Myriad Sword Alliance would witness the moment. Before leaving, Duguqing had specifically told Su Yi that when the demon sword was completely refined, it would be the time for him and Su Yi to discuss the grand plan. However, at this time, Duguqing was acting out his act, while Su Yi was also acting out his own act. Duguqing was worried that Su Yi would not enter Sword Mountain, while Su Yi was also worried about what kind of conspiracy there might be in Sword Mountain. Everyone's target was the Myriad Sword Mountain. Had the Myriad Sword Alliance chosen a side? If they had chosen a side and he had arrived at the Myriad Sword Alliance as promised, they should have been able to kill him. What was Duguqing waiting for? What the hell is this guy thinking? Lu Ruashi sat in the inner room. Her eyes were filled with suspicion as she could not figure out what was going on. Su Yi shook his head and turned to look at Lu Ruashi. Shortly after, he sat down and said softly, "He even specially organized a demon sword refining conference for me. It's a little grand. Let's see what he's going to do tomorrow." Lu Ruashi nodded worriedly. Looking at Lu Ruashi's pale face, Su Yi held Lu Ruashi's hand. Both of them looked at each other and their hearts were filled with warmth. 10 minutes into the night, Su Yi's eyes were wide open. Under the faint silver moonlight, a figure flitted past the window. "Protect Ruashi. I'll go take a look." Su Yi transmitted his voice to Tunten and turned into a phantom as he rushed out of the courtyard. In the dark night, Duguyuma's silver hair and the moonlight complemented each other. He opened his blue eyes and looked at Su Yi in shock. Did I disturb you? Duguyuma was a little frightened and took a step back. Aren't you going to rest? Sui asked, not answering his question. In fact, at this time, rest was something that was dispensable for a martial artist. However, it was strange that Duguyuma would appear in the middle of the night. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.